Chapter 2881. The Illegitimate Child. There's another teleportation array hidden in the deepest stone chamber of this underground chamber. Ghost Plume had no choice but to reveal the location of the second teleportation array. Zhuowen carried Ghost Plume and returned to the deepest part of the underground chamber, arriving at the spacious stone chamber. Most of the items in the deepest part of the stone chamber had been plundered clean by Zhuowen. At this moment, it looked very spacious and empty. At the center of the stone chamber, the altar was still standing. Below the altar, the 9 primitive dead flowers were emitting a dazzling golden radiance. Surging essence energy was constantly surging upwards, forming a terrifying essence energy vortex. Zhuowen threw Ghost Plume to the ground and said with a cold gaze, "Speak. Where is the second teleportation array in this stone chamber?" Zhuowen was puzzled. When he was searching the stone chamber earlier, he didn't find any teleportation arrays. Therefore, he could only ask Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume pointed at the ground about 7 inches in front of the primitive dead flowers and said, "There is a palm-sized pattern there. Channel your energy into the pattern and the teleportation array will naturally appear." Ghost Plume didn't dare to deceive him. His life was now in Zhuowen's hands. If he hid anything and was discovered by Zhuowen, he would die a miserable death. After all, Zhuowen could easily soul search him and then kill him. After sealing Ghost Plume's energy, Zhuowen walked to the spot 7 inches away from the primitive dead flowers and gently wiped away the soil on the ground with his right hand. Soon after, he discovered that under the soil, there was indeed a palm-sized pattern tile. Zhuowen didn't act blindly without thinking. Instead, he lifted Ghost Plume and undid the seal on Ghost Plume's body. He coldly said, "Activate this pattern." Ghost Plume's expression was unsightly. He knew that Zhuowen didn't trust him. However, he felt extremely helpless in his heart. He knew that he had to do as Zhuowen said. After all, his life was now in his opponent's hands. Ghost Plume barely managed to channel a sliver of energy into the pattern, causing it to emit a dazzling light. Soon after, Zhuowen discovered that, with the pattern as the center, complex array patterns appeared. Zhuowen could tell at a glance that the pattern of the array formation was a teleportation array. However, Zhuowen soon realized that something was amiss. The light from the teleportation array grew brighter and brighter until it eventually engulfed Ghost Plume. "This guy wants to escape?" Zhuowen reacted quickly. He pointed with his right hand and immediately used the space-time sacred art. A huge space-time river emerged, circling above the teleportation array that was densely covered in light patterns. A purple sun smashed over without warning, and instantly, time stopped. Although the time stopped was very short, it was enough for Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a step forward and rushed to the teleportation array like lightning. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed Ghost Plume's shoulder, which was covered in the light of the teleportation array. Then he twisted it fiercely. Ghost Plume screamed, but his eyes revealed a resolute look. He did not hesitate to cut off his shoulder. Blood splattered, but he did not slow down and wanted to completely teleport away. Unfortunately, Zhuowen could not do as Ghost Plume wished and used the space-time sacred art to the extreme. The space-time river in the surroundings continued to condense into a terrifying space-time river that engulfed the entire teleportation array. Instantly, the teleportation array that had been activated came to a standstill. Although the time stop only lasted for a breath of time, it was more than enough for Zhuowen. Zhuowen's right hand was like lightning. He grabbed Ghost Plume's head and pulled, forcibly pulling him out of the teleportation array. The moment Ghost Plume was pulled out of the teleportation array, the light from the teleportation array reached its peak and quickly dimmed. Clearly, the teleportation was over. Ghost Plume was thrown to the side in a daze. He knew that he was done for. Zhuowen ignored Ghost Plume. Instead, he clenched his right hand into a fist and punched the teleportation array without restraint. A terrifying energy burst out, and the ear-piercing sound of glass shattering came from the teleportation array. Zhuowen's power was very terrifying, rudely destroying this transmission array completely. After doing all this, Zhuowen's gaze landed on Gue Ling, who was not far away. The killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed and was on the verge of bursting out. Gue Ling felt the terrifying killing intent, and his whole body trembled violently. However, he still said with fear in his voice, "Zhuowen, you can't kill me. I'll tell you now that I have another identity. I'm the son of Sect Master Sun Qian. If you kill me, my father won't let you off." Zhuowen's gaze was strange. Ghost Plume was one of the 5 freaks of the host region and the #1 genius of the 10 Extremes Corp sect. He knew all this. However, he never knew that Ghost Plume was the son of Senki Yin. If Ghost Plume was telling the truth, then this matter must be known by everyone in the host region. Ghost Plume could also see the disbelief in Zhuowen's eyes. He hurriedly said, "I'm only the illegitimate son of the sect master. This isn't something to be proud of, so it hasn't been made public. However, the sect master truly treats me as his own son. If you kill me, you know the consequences when the sect master returns and finds out." Ghost Plume seemed to have gained a bit of confidence when he said this, and there was a hint of arrogance in his voice. Unfortunately, Zhuowen raised his hand and slapped Ghost Plume, slamming his head into the ground. Zhuowen walked over with large strides and lifted Gue Ling up once more. After that, he used his right hand to slap Gue Ling's face without restraint, causing the sounds of slapping to ring out continuously. After Ghost Plume was beaten black and blue, Zhuowen finally stopped and threw him to the ground. "Ghost Plume, so what if you're the son of Senki Yin? Even if Senki Yin provoked me, I still dare to beat him up? Not to mention you're just his son," Zhuowen said expressionlessly. Ghost Plume trembled with anger, but at the same time, he was even more terrified. He realized that Zhuowen was completely fearless. He didn't even put Senki Yin in his eyes. He probably wouldn't even blink when killing him. "I don't want to play guessing games with you anymore. I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately, you didn't cooperate at all. Now, I can only search your soul." Zhuowen didn't want to waste any more words with Ghost Plume. He placed his right hand on Ghost Plume's head, intending to search his soul. His soul had been modified by the Panga banner, so it was much stronger than Ghost Plume's. Naturally, it wasn't too difficult to search his soul. Ghost Plume's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He hurriedly said, "I know I was wrong. Please let me go this time." Ghost Plume finally put down his dignity and begged Zhuowen for mercy. Unfortunately, Zhuowen didn't care at all. He was determined to search Ghost Plume's soul. "I know how to undo the formation on the surface of the original dead flower. As long as you let me go, I can help you take it out." Chapter 2882. Devouring Essentuan stopped what he was doing and looked at Ghost Plume with interest. He didn't expect Ghost Plume to know how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Zhuowen had examined the restriction before and found it to be very powerful. Even if he used the primordial everlasting sword, it would be very difficult for him to break it. That was why he didn't immediately try to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Instead, he first searched through the other items in the stone room before slowly studying the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Now that Ghost Plume said he knew how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower, Zhuowen didn't doubt him too much. There were a total of 2 teleportation arrays in the depths of this underground secret room. One of them led to Ghost Plume's cave abode, while the other led to Senki Yin's cave abode. From this, it could be seen that Senki Yin truly valued Ghost Plume, his illegitimate son. In that case, it was reasonable that Ghost Plume knew how to undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower. Seeing Zhuowen slowly remove his right hand, Ghost Plume sighed in relief. However, his eyes were filled with bitterness. "Since you know, why don't you undo the restriction on the surface of the undead flower for me to see? If you can undo it, I promise to spare your life. If you can't, then you can just die." Zhuowen's eyes were cold and merciless. He wasn't polite to Ghost Plume at all. He knew that Ghost Plume wouldn't yield to force, so his attitude had to be firm. Ghost Plume's eyes flickered. He said in a deep voice, "Zhuowen, I need you to swear a heavenly oath." If I can undo the restriction on the undead flower, then you must spare my life. Otherwise, you will suffer a backlash from the heavens. You don't believe me? Zhuowen grinned. His smile contained a biting cold intent. Ghost Plume couldn't help but shrink back. Ghost Plume, you should know that as long as I search your soul, you won't be able to keep any secrets from me, Zhuowen said calmly. Ghost Plume's eyes flickered, but he shook his head and said, Zhuowen, you don't understand at all. This primitive death flower restriction is powerful, but Sect Master also imposed a bloodline restriction on it. Only cultivators with his bloodline are qualified to break this restriction. If you're not related by blood, even if you know the method to break the formation, you will still fail in the end and be devoured by the power of the formation. Bang! As soon as Ghost Plume finished speaking, he felt as if he had suffered a heavy blow to his chest. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground not far away, his entire body twitching. You! Gu Ling struggled to get up and looked at Zhuowen in front of him with a face full of fear. Ghost Plume, let me tell you, I, Zhuowen, hate being threatened the most. Do you think I will tolerate you just because you threaten me? Zhuowen's eyes were filled with disdain. After I kill you and obtain the method to break the formation from you, I will try it myself, and you will be dead for sure. There are only two paths in front of you now. Either you break the formation from me, or you die. As for making me swear an oath to the heavenly Tao to be bound by you, don't think too much about it. That is impossible. Zhuowen's attitude was very unyielding. Ghost Plume's face paled. In the end, he lowered his head and stopped bargaining with Zhuowen. He knew that this method wouldn't work on Zhuowen. Ghost Plume staggered over to the primitive death flower restriction. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of essence blood, his hands forming a series of seals. This time, Ghost Plume didn't play any tricks. He was really afraid. He knew very well that if he dared to play any tricks, Zhuowen would really kill him. Zhuowen silently watched Ghost Plume's every move. He didn't let down his guard. This Ghost Plume was very cunning, and he wouldn't make the same mistake. However, when he saw the restriction on the surface of the primitive death flower gradually dim, he slowly relaxed. He knew that Ghost Plume was really trying to break the formation. After about half an incense stick's time, the restriction on the surface of the primitive death flower finally began to crack. Finally, it shattered with a bang. The moment the restriction shattered, a terrifying wave of essence energy erupted and filled the entire stone room. Originally, the essence chi emitted by the primordial dead flower was already terrifying enough due to the obstruction of the restriction. Now that the restriction had shattered, the majority of the essence energy accumulated within the restriction was like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins. It was vast and majestic. Zhuowen's eyes lit up with excitement when he sensed the powerful essence energy emitting from the restriction. Ghost Plume immediately retreated after breaking the restriction. His eyes were filled with apprehension and even some fear. Zhuowen sensed Ghost Plume's abnormality, but he didn't immediately charge forward. Instead, he looked at Ghost Plume indifferently. Ghost Plume felt his scalp go numb from Zhuowen's gaze. He could only brace himself and say, Zhuowen, the raw materials used to cultivate the primitive death flower were all early-stage creation realm experts when they were alive. They were defeated by the Sect Master and were captured by the Sect Master. After the Sect Master cultivated these 9 primordial dead man flowers, he left behind several backup plans. The restriction and bloodline restriction were only 2 of them. The other backup plan was these 9 golden bodies. If you want to obtain the 9 primitive death flowers, you have to defeat the 9 golden bodies. Otherwise, you don't have the right to obtain them. Zhuowen nodded. He only believed half of Ghost Plume's words. Defeating the 9 golden bodies to obtain the primitive death flowers was probably the right thing to do. As for how strong the 9 golden bodies were, Zhuowen wasn't sure. He also knew that even if he asked Ghost Plume, the latter probably wouldn't tell him the truth. However, from Gu Ling's performance, the strength of these 9 golden bodies was not ordinary at all. Zhuan imprisoned Ghost Plume again and threw him into the outside world. Then, he clasped his hands together, and his body emitted a crystalline radiance. At the same time, black vortexes emerged around Zhuan's body. These vortexes weren't large, only the size of a thumb. However, there were many of them, and they densely covered his entire body. A terrifying, devouring power was generated from these black vortexes. Soon after, the surging essence emitted from the 9 primitive dead man flowers on the heads of the 9 golden bodies was rapidly absorbed into Zhuo Wen's body. In the process of absorbing the essence, Zhuo Wen's body became more and more crystalline. Zhuo Wen's eyes were full of surprise. The essence of the primitive death flowers was actually so beneficial to his body that it could promote the evolution and consolidation of his body. Although the speed of evolution was very slow, at least it did make his body evolve. Since the Pangu's sacred body had advanced to 5 stars, it had become extremely picky about energy. The special class Heavenly Path Crystal was useless to the current Pangu sacred body. No matter how many special class Heavenly Path Crystals he absorbed, his Pangu's sacred body showed no signs of evolution. However, the primitive death flowers were different. They could actually make his body evolve. Moreover, this was only the essence of the primitive death flowers. If he absorbed the primitive death flowers, the evolution of his Pangu sacred body would probably be even faster and more terrifying. Chapter 2883, Battle Golden Body Ha. What Zhuo didn't notice was that when he was crazily absorbing the essence of the primordial dead flower, the one in front of the 9 golden bodies moved slightly. Its golden head turned toward Zhuo. 2 golden flames suddenly flickered in its empty eye sockets. A vast and terrifying aura escaped, causing the entire stone chamber to tremble. Zhuo naturally felt this terrifying aura. He looked at the golden body in front of him that was slowly standing up. Boom! The golden flames in the golden body's eye sockets flickered violently. The entire stone chamber seemed to be in a furnace. The temperature was frighteningly high. The golden body suddenly jumped, causing the ground to shake. It appeared in front of Zhuo as if it had teleported. Its right fist was shining with golden light, and it directly punched toward Zhuo's face. Zhuo's body was crystal clear. Instead of retreating, he clenched his right fist and punched out. His joints creaked, and a strong wind swept out, forming a terrifying storm. Boom! The 2 fists collided, and a thunderous sound exploded. Terrifying waves of air spread out with the 2 of them as the center, sweeping everything around them. Zhuo let out a muffled groan and continued to retreat. The golden body took a step back and stabilized its body. Both of its feet once again pushed off the ground and shot out like an arrow. Its speed was extremely fast as it continued to attack Zhuo. Zhuo's eyes were gloomy. This golden body was very powerful. It was worthy of being an early-stage creation master when it was alive. Although it was only a skeleton now and its strength had decreased, it was still around the late-stage creation master. Its strength was comparable to Yin Wuxia's. Zhuo did defeat Yin Wuxia in the past, but he relied on Ho Yi's divine bow and not the power of his Pangu sacred body. According to Zhuo's estimation, his current 5-star Pangu sacred body should be able to fight an early-stage creation master, but he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Just now, when he fought with the golden body, he knew that he would not be able to defeat the golden body. However, Zhuo was not discouraged, nor was he prepared to use the Ho Yi divine bow. This golden body's strength was not much stronger than his, and it was just the right target for him to hone his strength. Kill! Zhuo's fighting spirit soared to the sky. He pounced over like a wild beast and fought with the golden body. The terrifying aftermath spread out and turned the space of the entire stone room upside down. While Zhuo was fighting the golden body, the devouring vortexes all over his body were like a whale sucking in water, sucking in the surrounding essence energy. Furthermore, in the process of fighting with him, The golden body was constantly consuming its essence energy. At the same time, it was releasing even more essence energy. During the battle between Zhuowen and the golden body, Zhuowen became more and more courageous. His Panga's sacred body was also constantly strengthening. After 100 rounds of fighting, Zhuowen suddenly roared. The surface of his body became crystal clear like jade, and his physical aura was instantly strengthened to a new height. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. In the process of absorbing the essence energy, his Pangu's sacred body had reached the peak of the 5-star early stage. He was only a little bit away from reaching the middle stage of the 5-star early stage. I must defeat this golden body and obtain this primitive dead man flower. Then, my Pangu's sacred body will have no problem reaching the middle stage of the 5-star early stage. Zhuowen's eyes were burning with passion, and his attacks became even fiercer. Especially after using the tyrannical Tao slaughtering skill, his attacks became even more fierce and powerful, completely suppressing the golden body for a while. Finally, Zhuowen roared and punched out with his fists like lightning. Waves of powerful Taoist rhymes streaked across the sky, and they were even more dazzling than fireworks. Crack! The golden body was directly smashed into pieces by Zhuowen's fists. Zhuowen's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He took off the golden body's head, and the golden primitive dead man flower grew quietly on the top of its head. Zhuowen crushed the golden flower into powder, and the terrifying essence chi that surged out was like a golden mist rolling and surging around Zhuowen. Zhuowen unceremoniously swallowed the golden essence energy into his body. Through the numerous acupoints on the surface of his body, it spread into his flesh and blood, nourishing his physical energy and strengthening his Panga's sacred body. Boom! A muffled, thunder-like sound came from Zhuowen's body, followed by the sound of dense bones hitting each other. Zhuowen's body was sparkling and translucent, and it was glowing green. Zhuowen's body was full of green light, and he was like a god descending to earth. Zhuowen let out a long roar, and his eyes were full of joy. Since his Pangu's sacred body had advanced to 5 stars, he had finally made another breakthrough. What a powerful force! I've only advanced from the early stage of 5 stars to the middle stage of 5 stars, but my strength has increased so much. Zhuowen casually waved his right hand, and the surrounding space was directly torn apart, revealing a black void. This force was more than several times stronger than before. Ha ha ha! When Zhuowen destroyed the first golden body, the remaining 8 golden bodies also moved. Golden flames burned in their eye sockets, as if they were going to destroy the world. Whoosh! 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 The 8 golden bodies stood up at the same time and rushed toward Zhuowen like 8 terrifying golden lights. Zhuowen was not afraid. He took a step forward, and his body was full of green. Ring-shaped waves of air rolled out, and it was extremely terrifying. Then Zhuowen performed the tyrannical Tao slaughtering skill, and his fists turned into the world's sharpest weapons. He quickly blasted them out, and they transformed into blurry phantoms. Bang! 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 8 dull sounds rang out. The moment the 8 golden bodies bombarded Zhuowen, they were all blown away by a terrifying force. They smashed into the surrounding rock walls. The 3 divine swords, who had been collecting precious ores in the surroundings, watched this scene with their mouths agape. Especially Xiaohe, who muttered to herself, "This kid has only advanced by a small realm, and his strength has increased so much." What Xiaohe did not know was that the higher the level of the Panga's sacred body, the more difficult it was to advance. Naturally, the increase was also terrifying. Generally speaking, the primordial dead flower was enough to let a peak eternal overlord cultivator completely step into the 3rd step of the Tao, proving realm and consolidate it. However, Zhuowen had used a primordial dead flower to advance from the early stage of 5 stars to the middle stage of 5 stars. This showed how difficult it was to advance the Panga's sacred body. At the instant the 8 golden bodies were blasted flying, Zhuan bounced off with his legs and shot out explosively. Very soon, he approached the golden body that was closest to him, and he suddenly smashed his fist out with the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique. It pierced through the golden body's chest and came out from the back. Then, Zhuo Wen's right hand shook, and the seemingly indestructible golden body shattered into pieces, shattering into golden powder on the ground. Only a golden head and the primitive dead man flower were left. The moment Zhuo Wen destroyed the second golden avatar, the remaining 7 golden avatars had already stabilized themselves. They fearlessly pounced at Zhuo Wen again at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 2884. Alarming the 10 extremes, Een Corpse Sec Bang. Bang, bang. Continuous explosions resounded once again. Immediately, the 7 golden bodies that had besieged Zhuo Wen were sent flying in a sorry state, and all of them were embedded in the surrounding rock walls. Zhuo Wen's body was crystal clear and emitted a strong light. His aura was like rising steam, surging upward and forming a mushroom-shaped airwave. At this moment, Zhuo Wen was like a god or a demon. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and each strand was crystal clear like jade. Boom! Zhuo Wen took a step forward and rushed to the nearest golden body in an instant. He opened his right palm and pinched the golden body's face. Zhuo Wen's strength was too strong. The golden body's skull seemed to be unable to withstand it, and dense cracks appeared. The golden body's bony hands, which seemed to be made of gold, waved wildly. It seemed to be at a loss, as if it was a drowning person. Boom! Zhuo Wen lifted the golden body above his head and slammed it on the ground. The golden body was pressed to the ground by Zhuo Wen like a toy. A terrifying force spread out from the ground, causing countless cracks to appear on the ground. The cracks spread out in all directions. It was a terrifying sight. Zhuo Wen pressed his right hand on the golden body's skull and used his left hand as a knife. He revealed a powerful sky-splitting blade and drilled it into the golden body's chest like a hot knife through butter. The sharp sky-splitting blade pierced through the golden body's sternum without any hindrance, and then came out of the golden body's spine. Then, the golden body's bones were completely shattered into powder under the effect of such a terrifying force. Zhuo Wen took the golden body's head and stuffed it into the macro world. He then continued to rush toward the remaining 6 golden bodies. After destroying 3 golden bodies in a row, the remaining 6 golden bodies had lost their minds. However, they instinctively sensed danger and began to retreat. Unfortunately, Zhuo Wen naturally would not let them succeed. He used his movement technique and rushed into the 6 golden bodies. He even used the tyrannical Tao slaying technique, one move after another. Its power was terrifying and its momentum was shocking. After 30 rounds, Zhuo Wen destroyed the 4th golden body. After 50 rounds, the 5th golden body was blasted into smithereens. In the 150th round, Zhuo Wen's right fist was like an electric drill as it fiercely blasted out. It pierced through the chest of the last golden body, and a terrifying energy burst out. All the bones in this golden body had exploded, leaving behind only a complete golden skull, which Zhuo Wen casually put away into his pouch. Not far away, the weapon spirits of the 3 legendary swords were dumbfounded when they saw this. They felt that this Zhuo Wen was way too heaven-defying. The 9 golden bodies were no weaker than late-stage god of creation stage cultivators, yet they were still defeated by Zhuo Wen so easily. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuo Wen summoned Ghost Plume from the Great World. After casually tossing it aside, he sat cross-legged on the other side. Ghost Plume's entire body was imprisoned. It lay on the ground in a sorry state, unable to move. He looked left and right with a puzzled look in his eyes. This was because he did not find the 9 golden bodies with the original dead flower in the stone chamber. Zhuo Wen ignored Ghost Plume. Instead, he took out the original dead flower. He planned to use the original dead flower to improve his Pangu sacred body. Looking at the original dead flower in Zhuo Wen's hand, Ghost Plume's pupils shrank to the size of needles. It could not help but exclaim, You defeated the 9 golden bodies? How is that possible? Even a peak god of creation stage cultivator would not be a match for the 9 golden bodies when they joined forces. However, Zhuowen had defeated all of them. This made Ghost Plume feel incredulous. Zhuowen ignored Ghost Plume. Previously, he had put into the great world mainly to prevent it from doing anything that would hinder him. Now that he had defeated all 9 golden bodies, and he did not want to expose the existence of the great world too much, he naturally could not let Ghost Plume stay in the great world for too long. Zhuowen held the original dead flower in his hand and began to slowly absorb the essence and energy of the original dead flower. Previously, he had crushed the original dead flower because he was pressed for time. This way, he could absorb all the energy in the flower into his body in a short period of time. This would allow him to advance quickly. However, this also wasted a lot of the energy of the original dead flower. Now that the 9 golden bodies had been defeated and Ghost Plume was basically useless, there was no threat to Zhuowen in this underground chamber. Naturally, Zhuowen would not use such a wasteful method to absorb the original dead flower. Streams of golden energy flowed into Zhuowen's palm and spread to all the meridians in his body, merging with his flesh and soul. Ghost Plume froze in place, staring blankly at Zhuowen, absorbing the energy of the original dead flower. His heart sank to the bottom. The original dead flower was something that Senki Yin valued greatly, even more than his own life. Now, not only had the underground chamber been broken into and its secrets exposed, even the most precious 9 original dead flowers had been snatched away by Zhuowen. If Senki Yin knew about this, he would be furious, and Ghost Plume would not be able to get away with it. When the time came, he would have to bear the wrath of Senki Yin. Thinking of this, Ghost Plume felt bitter. He knew that even if Zhuowen set him free, he would not have a good ending. He would not be able to escape Senki Yin's punishment, even if he was Senki Yin's illegitimate son. However, it was better than falling into the hands of Zhuowen. After all, Zhuowen might want to kill him, but Senki Yin would not. After all, he was Senki Yin's direct descendant. While Zhuowen was absorbing the energy of the original dead flower in the depths of the underground chamber, the upper echelons of the Yin Corpse sect were shaken. Sakyamuni brought the news of Zhuowen breaking into the underground chamber to the 4th elder, Ba Jingwei. The moment Ba Jingwei heard the news, his eyes spat fire, and his chest burned with anger. He could not contain it, so he immediately rushed into Ghost Plume's cave with Sakyamuni and entered the ancient pagoda at the bottom of the Blue Moon Lake. However, after the 2 of them activated the transmission array in the ancient pagoda, they found that the transmission array did not work. Ba Jingwei's face was very gloomy. He knew that the transmission array that led to the other side of the underground chamber had been destroyed, so the transmission array in the ancient pagoda was completely ineffective. Damn it, it must be that bastard Zhuowen's doing. He destroyed the transmission array to prevent us from entering the depths of the underground chamber to find him. Sakyamuni was also flustered and exasperated. Ghost Plume has already entered. With Ghost Plume's strength, it should not be a problem to capture Zhuowen. Ba Jingwei frowned slightly. Sakyamuni was somewhat helpless, but there was also a hidden worry in his heart. He always felt that Zhuowen was not simple. When he fought with Zhuowen, he was sure that Zhuowen had concealed a portion of his strength. Chapter 2885. Great Elder Gao, Yanghong Sakyamuni suddenly said, "Master, Zhuowen is not a simple person. We can't let our guard down. I remember that there should be 2 teleportation arrays that lead to the secret underground chamber. Besides Senior Ghost Plume, don't we have another choice?" Ba Jingwei frowned and said hesitantly, "There are indeed 2 teleportation arrays that lead to the secret underground chamber. However, the second teleportation array is in the Sect Master's cave. You should know that the Sect Master's cave is heavily guarded. Even I am not qualified to enter. I remember that the Great Elder is guarding the Sect Master's cave. Master, you can inform the Great Elder and explain it to him. He should let us in. After all, the secret underground chamber is of great importance. We can't afford to lose it Sakyamuni continued. Ba Jingwei's eyes flickered. He was moved. He knew about the existence of the secret underground chamber. He had entered it several times and learned about the existence of a dead flower. He was even lucky enough to obtain a few mature dead flowers. At that time, his cultivation had reached a bottleneck. It was precisely because he had absorbed those mature dead flowers that his cultivation had broken through the bottleneck and advanced to a new realm. Therefore, he had a deep impression of the dead flower. In his heart, he yearned for such a divine medicine with such obvious effects. If some unknown situation happened to the secret underground chamber because of Zhuan's intrusion, it would be a huge loss for the entire 10 Extremes Corp sect. I'll send a message to the Great Elder and see what he has to say. Ba Jingwei took out a communication jade talisman and sent a message to the Great Elder, explaining the ins and outs of the matter in detail, especially the matter of Zhua when breaking into the underground chamber, which he solemnly mentioned. Soon, Ba Jingwei received a reply from the Great Elder. Sure, Tian, follow me to the Sect Master's Cave. The Great Elder already knows and is willing to use the teleportation array in the Sect Master's Cave with us. Ba Jingwei's expression brightened. He called out to Sakyamuni and left the Blue Moon Lake. Soon, the two of them arrived at the Sect Master's Cave. The sect leader's abode was not as grand as he had imagined. Instead, it was filled with green mountains and clear waters, as if it was an ordinary mountain valley in the mortal world. On the surface of this beautiful mountain forest scenery, there were layers upon layers of restriction lights flashing. Obviously, there was an extremely powerful restriction formation set up on the surface of the Sect Master's cave mansion. Moreover, it was not just one formation, but many large formations combined to form a terrifying group of formations. At this moment, on top of an inconspicuous rock at the entrance of the valley, a skinny old man sat cross-legged. The old man was dressed in plain black clothes. The only thing that stood out about him was his pair of extremely sharp eyes. They were constantly emitting a breathtaking light, giving people the feeling that they were being stared at by an eagle. The skinny old man in front of him was the Grand Elder of the 10 Ultimate Corp sect, Gao Yanghong. His strength was second only to Senki Yin within the 10 Ultimate Corp sect. Great Elder, Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni bowed deeply to the skinny old man, their eyes filled with awe. Gao Yanghong's face was expressionless. He looked at Ba Jingwei and said, Elder Ba, are you sure that an outsider has broken into the secret underground chamber? If I find out that you are lying, don't blame me for being rude to you. Ba Jingwei's body trembled, and he hurriedly said, Rest assured, Great Elder, I am not lying. You know that there is a teleportation array hidden in Ghost Plume's cave mansion. Zhuan entered the secret underground chamber from the teleportation array in the Blue Moon Lake. That Zhuan is very cunning. He destroyed the teleportation array on the other side. Gao Yanghong nodded. He knew about Ghost Plume's identity and naturally knew that Senki Yin had set up a teleportation array in Ghost Plume's cave mansion. Come with me, Gao Yanghong said, then led Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni into the valley. After a while, the group of 3 passed through layers of restrictions and arrived in front of a small pool in the deepest part of the valley. Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni's faces were filled with awe and dread. Along the way, they could clearly feel the strong, killing intent of the restrictions around them. They had no doubt that if they accidentally triggered these restrictions, they would die without a burial place. Gao Yanghong came to a spot 7 inches in front of the small pool, squatted down, and used his right hand to wipe away the soil, revealing a palm-sized pattern. Gao Yanghong activated this pattern, and the pattern of a teleportation array appeared in the center of the pool. This is the teleportation array set up by Sect Master. Let's go in. Gao Yanghong's eyes were calm as he stepped into the center of the pool. Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni naturally hurried to follow. Great Elder, the teleportation array at Blue Moon Lake has been destroyed. Will Zhuan find the second teleportation array in the underground chamber and destroy it as well? Sakyamuni asked as soon as he landed on the pool. Gao Yanghong smiled faintly and said, You can rest assured that the teleportation array set up by Sect Master here is very secretive. You need to find the corresponding hidden compartment to activate it. The same is true for the teleportation array in the underground chamber. It is impossible for outsiders to find the teleportation array here. Sakyamuni nodded, his eyes flashing. He knew that with Great Elder's help, Zhuowen was doomed. Thinking that Zhuowen's head was about to be separated from his body, Sakyamuni's cheeks flushed with excitement as he imagined the scene of Zhuowen being captured alive and tortured. However, Sakyamuni soon discovered that something was wrong because the teleportation array above the pool did not move. He revealed a puzzled expression and looked at Gao Yanghong in front of him. The latter's eyes were gloomy and his hands were still forming seals, but the teleportation array did not move at all. "Great Elder, what's going on?" Ba Jingwei was a little stunned and asked very honestly. Gao Yanghong took a deep breath, but his eyes were spitting fire. He was very angry. "The teleportation array here has been destroyed." Gao Yanghong's voice was very stiff. "What?" Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni were shocked. One had to know that Gao Yanghong had just said that the teleportation array here was very secretive, and the other end of the underground chamber was even more secretive. Zhuowen would never be able to find it. However, Gao Yanghong had just made a solemn vow, and the teleportation array was actually unable to be used. This was a ruthless slap to Gao Yanghong's face. Gao Yanghong also felt the surprised gazes of Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni, and his old face turned slightly red. However, his heart was soon filled with anger and disbelief. He was angry that an outsider named Zhuowen had actually destroyed the second teleportation array. What was even more inconceivable was how that guy had found the second teleportation array. Although he knew the location of the second teleportation array, Senki In had told him about it. If he were to look for it himself, it would be impossible to find it. Chapter 2886. 5-star peak. Could it be that something happened to Senior Ghost Plume in the underground chamber? That's why Zhuowen learned of the location of the second teleportation array. Sakyamuni suddenly said, "Is Zhuowen that strong? Even Ghost Plume is no match for him?" Gao Yanghong was puzzled. He had learned from Ba Jingwei that Zhuowen, who had broken into the underground chamber, was also a member of the younger generation and had defeated Sakyamuni. Sakyamuni was indeed talented, but his strength was still lacking. The gap between him and Ghost Plume was not small. Ghost Plume was one of the 5 great monstrous geniuses and the #1 expert of the younger generation in the 10 Extremities Corps sect. His strength was comparable to the experts of the older generation. In the younger generation of the host region, apart from the other 4 monstrous geniuses who were also part of the 5 monstrous geniuses, Gui Ling basically could not find an opponent in the younger generation. Zhuowen is indeed not simple. Perhaps Ghost Plume was tricked by him in the underground chamber. After all, he entered the underground chamber before Ghost Plume. Moreover, we can't let him go. After all, he entered the underground chamber and saw everything inside. This is not a good thing. Ba Jingwei's eyes were gloomy. He looked at Gao Yanghong, obviously intending to let Gao Yanghong make the decision. We can't let him leave the sect. Otherwise, we won't be able to answer to the sect master. Moreover, what he saw can't be leaked to the outside world. It will be very detrimental to our sect, Gao Yanghong said solemnly. Great Elder, the 2 teleportation arrays have been destroyed. What should we do now? Ba Jingwei asked helplessly. We can only take one step at a time. When the underground secret chamber was being built, the sect master had prepared a passageway leading to the surface at the entrance of the underground secret chamber. However, the passage is connected in all directions and is shrouded in the power of the Earth's core. Most of our strength will be suppressed in the passage and will only be restored after entering the underground chamber, Gao Yanghong said. Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni's expressions brightened. They only knew about the teleportation array, but this was the first time they had heard about the passage to the underground chamber. They knew that this was a secret. Perhaps only the Great Elder knew about the extra passage. The others probably didn't know about it. However, it will take 3 days to go deep in the underground chamber, and there is a limit of 3 people. Since I have to maintain the stability of the passage, I can't go in. Go in, Gao Yanghong said. Ba Jingwei was pondering for a moment and then turned to Sakyamuni. Shurtian, don't go in. I will, and I will go too, great elders. Sakura opened his mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. He knew that Ba Jingwei was afraid that he wasn't strong enough to enter the secret underground chamber. Although Ba Jingwei was doing this for his own good, Sakyamuni felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Zhuan's figure appeared in his mind. Back then, Tian was just an ant in his eyes, but now he had far surpassed him. He had even lost the qualifications to confront Zhuan. Sakyamuni clenched his fists. He was very unwilling, but more than that, he felt helpless. I want to become stronger, Sakyamuni roared in his heart. Ever since he joined the 10 Absolutes Corp sect, he had always been the fastest cultivating genius. He was envied and looked up to by many of his peers, and the older generation was full of expectations for him. It could be said that Sakura was a monstrous genius who was favored by all. He originally thought that Zhuan was already not worth mentioning, but he didn't expect that Zhuan would easily defeat him in the sect, forcefully slapping his face. Sakyamuni knew that Zhuan had caused great trouble and was definitely going to die, but he was unwilling. Zhuan's shadow in his heart could not be erased no matter what. Sakyamuni's conviction to become stronger became even stronger. After dealing with this matter, Sakyamuni prepared to go into seclusion again. He would not come out of seclusion until his cultivation reached the 3rd step of the Tao validation realm. Moreover, Ba Jingwei had asked Senki Yin for some dead flowers so that he could use them when he broke through. Sakyamuni believed that with those dead flowers and his Tao root that was about to surpass the heaven rank, it would be much easier for him to break through. Gao Yanghong was very efficient. He led Ba Jingwei and Sakyamuni to a hidden cave. This cave was very narrow and could only fit around 1 person. It was pitch black inside, and the occasional breeze that flowed out was even more chilly. Gao Yanghong explained that this cave was the entrance to the secret underground room. However, the energy of the Earth's core was extremely suppressive to cultivators, so it would be very strenuous for them to enter the secret underground room through this passageway. Ba Jingwei didn't mind, and he notified the 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho. He intended to enter the secret underground room with them to capture Zhuan. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho quickly arrived, and Ba Jingwei gave them a simple explanation of their objective. They were first surprised, and then they both expressed their willingness to enter the secret underground room with Ba Jingwei. After they reached an agreement, Gao Yanghong stood at the entrance of the cave and formed seals with his hands. An enormous amount of energy surged into the cave. He used his own cultivation to suppress the energy of the Earth's core within the passageway and reduce the threat of the energy to the lowest level. After Gao Yanghong finished, he gave Ba Jingwei a look. The latter nodded and led the other 2 elders into the passageway. Zhuan slowly opened his eyes and looked at the withered primitive dead flower in his right palm. His eyes flickered. He had already stayed here for 2 days and absorbed 7 primitive dead man flowers. He had to admit that the primitive dead flower's essence energy was indeed very powerful. Zhuan relied on the primitive dead flower's enormous essence energy to forcibly raise the level of his Pangu sacred body to the peak of the 5-star level. Zhuan's strength had also increased greatly. If his 5-star Pangu sacred body could only be comparable to a late-stage Lord of Creation, his current strength was enough to fight against a half-step Lord of Creation. Of course, with the terrifying Pangu sacred body and Zhuan's terrifying self-healing ability, Zhuan might not even be a match for an early-stage Lord of Creation, but it wouldn't be so easy for an early-stage Lord of Creation to kill him. At this moment, including the primitive dead man flower he had used earlier, Zhuan had already used 8 primitive dead man flowers. He only had 1 primitive dead man flower left. Zhuan didn't use the last primitive dead flower. He knew that if his Pangu sacred body advanced from the peak of the 5-star level to the 6-star level, no matter how much energy it absorbed, it would be useless. He had to find new ancestral wizard venomous insects. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for his Panga's sacred body to continue to advance. As for the last primitive dead man flower, Zhuan tossed it to his main body to absorb. His original body's cultivation had already reached the peak of the Lord of Destiny. After absorbing the primitive dead flower, he should be able to break through to the Lord of Mystery. Zhuan separated his original body and gave the last primitive dead flower to him. His original body naturally didn't refuse. After receiving the primitive dead flower, he frantically absorbed it. The aura in his body also rapidly increased. It was very fast, like an awakened beast. It made people's hearts palpitate. Ghost Plume, who had been left aside by Zhuan, watched Zhuan use up all the primitive dead flowers with his own eyes. He felt his heart ache. One had to know that Senki Yin had spent a lot of effort to cultivate these primitive dead flowers. Chapter 2887. Ghost Plume's Concealment Boom. A thunderous sound came from the quiet stone room. The aura of Yishiwen's original body was like an erupting volcano, becoming more and more terrifying. When it reached its peak, it exploded with a loud bang. Above Yishiwen's head, an extremely terrifying pressure of the Way of Heaven appeared. It was as if an unprecedentedly huge mountain had fallen and smashed onto Yishiwen's head. It was very shocking. Yishiwen's original body opened his eyes. His face was slightly pale, but his eyes were bursting with excitement. He could clearly feel that the power in his body was transforming, sublimating, and mutating. He knew that he was about to break through. The terrifying Way of Heaven turned into a terrifying storm. Then it turned into a substantial force that swept out. It revealed a series of shocking visions that completely enveloped Zhuan. Zhuan's doppelganger carried Ghost Plume and retreated to a corner of the stone room. He did not interfere with Yishiwen's breakthrough. After all, this kind of breakthrough was usually difficult to interfere with. Otherwise, it would lead to unpredictable consequences. Xiao, on the other hand, brought the blood immortal sword and death sacrifice sword to the doppelganger's side. She looked at Yishiwen's original body gravely. During the time when Zhuan was absorbing the primordial dead flower and breaking through, Xiao and the other two had gained a lot. The three of them had taken almost all the precious materials around the stone room for their own use. Although their gains could not be compared to Zhuan's, they had still gained a lot. Boom, 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 boom. The visions of the Way of Heaven became more and more terrifying. They all crushed Yishiwen's original body. Yishiwen's original body stood up with a cold gaze. He performed the tyrannical Dao slaughtering technique move by move. His entire body turned into a terrifying weapon. Like a war machine, he destroyed the visions one after another. Finally, the moment Zhuan destroyed the last manifestation, the surrounding heavens might dissipated, and Zhuan's entire body was covered in wounds, blood gushing out from his wounds. However, Yishiwen's original body's aura was much more powerful than before. He was like a peerless god of war, standing there with an unimaginably terrifying aura flowing out of him. I've finally become the Lord of Profound Secrets. What power? My original body's power is much stronger than the average Lord of Profound Secrets. I'm probably comparable to an Lord. Ghost Plume Studio, and Ghost Plume Studio, who was in the Doppelguard. Lord of Profound Death. Lord was Studio, Lord Studio. Lord Master Studio, Lord Studio. Lord was Lord Studio, Lord Studio. Ghost Plume stared at Zhuan in disbelief. He really couldn't understand how this guy could be so powerful when he was just a master of profound death. Ghost Plume's expression was very complicated. He couldn't help but think of the ordinary wooden bow Zhuan had used to defeat him. He had a feeling that this ordinary wooden bow had an extraordinary origin. When Zhuan's divine arrow pierced through his body, he had sensed that it was just an ordinary god of creation arrow. In terms of power, it was slightly weaker than the average god of creation weapon. However, such an ordinary divine arrow had been able to pierce through his defensive divine weapon and his body. He had almost died on the spot. That wooden bow on this guy's body, could it be that thing? Ghost Plume thought of something. His eyes were filled with shock, but more than that, confusion. This was because he had seen that thing tens of thousands of years ago. He silently compared it to Zhuan's wooden bow and discovered that there was a huge difference between the two. Most importantly, the aura of Zhuan's wooden bow was completely different from that thing. He wasn't too sure. After the main body broke through, it fused with the clone. Zhuan's gaze fell on Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume felt his scalp go numb when he sensed Zhuan's gaze. He actually didn't dare to meet Zhuan's gaze. After experiencing Zhuan's terror, Ghost Plume was both afraid and afraid of Zhuan. Ghost Plume, I have something to ask of you. Zhuan suddenly asked after a moment of silence. Ghost Plume lowered his head and said in a low voice, "What is it? Do you know if there are any other ways to leave this underground secret room other than the 2 destroyed transportation arrays?" Zhuan lifted Ghost Plume's collar and looked straight at Ghost Plume. Ghost Plume's expression was very unnatural. He said in a low, muffled voice, "You also know that this underground secret room is completely sealed. Other than the transportation array, there are basically no other ways to enter this underground secret room. Also, don't try in vain to think that you can leave the 10 Extremes Corps sect through the underground secret room. This is because the sect master has already set up a terrifying, inescapable net around the underground secret room. If you try to leave through the underground secret room, you will easily trigger those restrictions and alarm the entire sect." Zhuan was silent. He still looked at Ghost Plume and grinned. "Ghost Plume, I still can't trust you. I still trust myself more." Ghost Plume's eyes were filled with fear. He knew what Zhuan was going to do. He hurriedly said, "Brother Zhuan, don't be rash. I just remembered that there seems to be another passage in this underground secret room." Zhuan's lips curled into a playful smile. He quietly looked at Ghost Plume as if he was looking at a clown. Ghost Plume could also see the meaning in Zhuan's eyes, and a trace of humiliation flashed across his eyes. "Speak." Zhuan casually threw Ghost Plume to the ground and said indifferently, "Due to Gue Ling's heavy injuries and the fact that his cultivation had been sealed by Zhuan, Gue Ling was basically no different from mortal. He did not even have the strength to truss up a chicken." Zhuan was not worried that Gue Ling would try anything funny. Ghost Plume sighed in his heart and said, "When this underground secret room was first built, there was a secret passage that led directly to this underground secret room. Furthermore, that passage is very deep and has the power of the Earth's core. Once a cultivator enters the passage, their strength will be greatly reduced. It will take at least 3 days to get out of that passage." Zhuan's eyes darkened. He lifted Ghost Plume and threw him to the ground. He said coldly, "You didn't tell me such an important thing in advance. Were you secretly hoping that an expert from the sect would come through that passage to save you? Now, show me the entrance to that passage." Ghost Plume was dizzy from the fall, but he didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly stood up and led the way for Zhuan. Chapter 2888. A hidden Whirlwind's eyes darkened as he silently followed behind Ghost Plume. Soon, Ghost Plume led Zhuan through the eerie corridor and arrived at a corridor filled with lockers in the middle of the underground chamber. The lockers on both sides of the corridor were very special. They didn't store the second-generation dead flower, but rather all sorts of miscellaneous items. Zhuan had been suspicious when he passed through this corridor, but he didn't pay much attention to it. It seemed that there really was something wrong with this corridor. The entrance to the passage is behind the lockers on the right. You'll see it when you open the lockers, Ghost Plume said helplessly. Zhuan did as he was told. After he moved the lockers, he found that there was indeed a narrow hole behind them that could only fit one person. Zhuan sent his divine sense into the hole and found that there was a mysterious force that suppressed his divine sense. His divine sense could only reach a few thousand meters away. Where does this passage lead to in the 10 extremes Corpse sect? Zhuan asked coldly. Ghost Plume didn't dare to hide anything and said, "It leads to the sect leader's cave. Only the sect leader and the great elder know about this passage. No one else knows about it." The sect leader's cave? Zhuan's expression turned ugly. He knew that this passage was a dead end for him. If he left through this passage, he would enter Senki Yin's cave. Although Senki Yin wasn't in the sect during this time, Ghost Plume said that the great elder of the 10 extremes Corpse sect had been guarding Senki Yin's cave. Zhuan had heard of the 10 extremes Corpse sect's Gao Yanghong. Within the sect, the Corpse sect was second only to Sun Qiyin. Even the host region, the Corpse sect's Gao Yanghong, was one of the strongest. Although Zhuan had many trump cards, he knew that he was no match for a terrifying expert like Gao Yanghong. In addition, Senki Yin's cave residence was heavily guarded with many terrifying restrictions. It could be said that the other end of the passage was a dead end for Zhuan. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuan summoned several array flags. Then, he performed a series of hand seals and began to set up a large array at the entrance of the passage. Zhuan first set up an illusion array to confuse the mind at the entrance, then set up one terrifying killing array after another. Zhuan knew that the secret underground chamber was the most important secret of the 10 extremes Corpse sect. Once the Grand Elder found out that someone had broken into the secret underground chamber, he would definitely send people into the secret underground chamber to capture him. Ghost Plume had said that there was a limit to the number of people who could enter the passage. Only 3 people could enter, and the Great Elder was needed to maintain the passage so that it would not collapse. Since the first Elder did not enter the passageway, Zhuan felt a lot more at ease. After setting up the layers of killing arrays, Zhuan entered the tunnel and set up a monitoring array formation 1,000 meters into the tunnel. Once someone entered this 1,000 meters, it would immediately trigger the monitoring array. At that time, Zhuan would immediately know who had entered the passage. Ghost Plume looked at the killing arrays set up by Zhuan. The corners of his eyes twitched, and his expression darkened. He did not expect Zhuan to be a divine array master at the pinnacle of the eternal grade. The killing arrays he set up were very powerful, and they were serial killing arrays. They were enough to seriously injure an ordinary creator. Even the creation master could be injured by the serial killing formation if he wasn't careful. After Zhuan retreated from the passage, he received a message from Xiaohe. His eyes narrowed, revealing a trace of surprise. "Ghost Plume, are you still hiding something from me?" Zhuan suddenly turned to Ghost Plume and asked murderously. Ghost Plume was taken aback. He quickly shook his head and said, "I have nothing to hide from you. As long as I know, I will tell you." Zhuan left with Ghost Plume and soon arrived at the stone chamber in the deepest part of the passage. At this moment, the Thunderfire sword was stabbed into the altar in the center of the stone chamber, smashing the jade altar into pieces. Underneath the jade altar, there was actually an oval cave. On the other side of the cave, there was a blazing heat. Waves of heat rushed out, and red light filled the sky. The entire secret room seemed to have turned into the inside of a furnace. Xiaohe, who was originally plundering the ores in the stone chamber, took a fancy to the jade on the altar. He cut it into pieces with his sword. After taking the jade, he found that there was another world under the altar, so he informed Zhuan with his divine sense. "What is this place under the altar? You should know, right?" Zhuan said coldly. Ghost Plume looked blankly at the cave under the altar. He shook his head and said, "Zhuan, I really didn't know there was another world under the altar. I really didn't lie to you about this. I can swear to the heavenly Tao." Zhuan took a deep look at Ghost Plume. After confirming that the latter was not lying, he nodded and continued. "You said that this underground secret chamber was built by Senki Yin, and his original intention was to study the dead flower?" Ghost Plume was taken aback. He immediately shook his head and said, "That's not the case. I once heard from the sect master that he built this underground secret chamber mainly for something. As for what it is, I don't know. Later, because the dead flower was too important, the sect master expanded and renovated this place, turning it into this underground secret chamber. Something. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Follow me inside and take a look. Zhuowen carried Ghost Plume and left his main body outside. After instructing Xiao Hei's 3 divine swords to guard the entrance, his doppelganger took Ghost Plume into the cave. Although Ghost Plume didn't seem to be lying, he still couldn't completely trust Ghost Plume. As soon as they entered the cave, Zhuowen felt his body heat up. The temperature inside was simply too high. Zhuowen discovered that there was a vast sea of magma at the bottom of the cave. From time to time, terrifying waves of fire would rise from the sea of magma and rise high into the air. They looked like terrifying magma dragons. Zhuowen discovered that the magma in the depths of the cave wasn't ordinary magma. It contained extremely powerful heavenly Tao principles and possessed extraordinary power. Ghost Plume's face was red. His cultivation was sealed, so he couldn't withstand the heat. If it weren't for Zhuowen's protection, Ghost Plume would have already been burned to ashes by the high temperature. Zhuowen's expression remained the same. The magma in the depths of the cave was indeed unusual and even terrifying. However, Zhuowen's Pangasacred body had been integrated with the Zhurong venomous insect. This venomous insect was the source of Zhurong's power. It was something that gathered all the essence of fire. Not only was the fire energy harmless to the venomous insect, but it was also the best tonic. Zhuowen noticed a huge stone pillar standing in the deepest part of the sea of magma. If it were an ordinary stone pillar, it would have melted long ago in such magma. However, this stone pillar was extremely sturdy. It stood in the sea of magma, and its surface was covered with complicated patterns. These patterns emitted a sparkling light and a heart-palpitating aura. At the top of the stone pillar, a scroll covered with black patterns was suspended. Chapter 2889. Yama Ghost Diagram. Bang Bang Bang. As Zhuowen approached the stone pillar, the sea of lava below suddenly became violent and surged up, engulfing Zhuowen in an attempt to pull him into the sea of lava. Zhuowen snorted coldly and pointed with his right finger. The magma that was sweeping over was actually dispersed. Even more magma that was surging over fled in panic, as if it was very afraid of Zhuowen. Ghost Plume was astonished, but Zhuowen's gaze was calm. Just now, he had used the power of the Zhurong parasite to repel the waves of lava. This was not difficult for the Zhurong parasite. Zhuowen arrived at the top of the stone pillar, but he was unable to approach the scroll at the center. There was a mysterious power that kept him 3 feet away. It's the power of this stone pillar that's sealing the scroll. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He also noticed that Ghost Plume beside him had an expression of disbelief. You recognize this thing? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Ghost Plume's gaze flickered, and he sighed lightly. I'm just guessing. This thing is most likely the Yama Ghost diagram. Yama Ghost diagram. Zhuowen's pupil shrank. This Yama Ghost diagram was very famous in the host region. When he was in the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, Huan Taiping had mentioned it before. Zhuowen was not a cultivator born and raised in the Xianmi Heavenly region, so he had asked Huan Taiping many things about the Xianmi Heavenly region. Thus, he knew many things about the Xianmi Heavenly region like the back of his hand. He was not as ignorant as he was in the beginning. Rather than saying that the Yama Ghost diagram was famous, it was more accurate to say that the master of the Yama Ghost diagram was too famous. The master of the Yama Ghost diagram was the Yama Ghost Lord. This person was extremely talented, and he had only spent a few hundred years to reach the first step of Tao validation. In 1,000 years, he had stepped into the second step of Tao validation. After cultivating for 5,000 years, he had stepped into the third step of Tao validation. Generally, those who could reach the third step of Tao confirmation were all brilliant geniuses. However, after reaching the third step, each step was like ascending to the heavens. It was extremely difficult to advance. Even the most monstrous geniuses would have their advancement speed become very slow. However, Yama Ghost Lord seemed to have the help of a god. After entering the third step of the Tao confirmation realm, His cultivation speed increased instead of slowing down. It only took him 1,000 years to break through again and become a heaven-reaching master. After becoming a heaven-span lord, Yamagul Lord's battle prowess was simply too shocking. Although he had only been an early heaven-span lord, he had been virtually invincible among his peers. He had even challenged mid-heaven-span lords and defeated all of them. Furthermore, the Yama Ghost Lord had a habit of challenging his opponents to a battle to the death. The winner would live, and the loser would die. The loser's soul would be absorbed into the Yama Ghost diagram and become the Yama Ghost Lord's puppet Deathsworn. After becoming an early heaven-span lord, the Yama Ghost Lord's style of doing things began to become arrogant and unruly. Even if the loser begged for mercy, he would not hesitate to kill them. Because of this, he had offended too many forces. Many forces had once joined forces to encircle and annihilate the Yama Ghost Lord. However, the Yama Ghost Lord's escape methods were extremely clever and varied. Basically, these forces' encirclement plans had all failed. After the Yama Ghost Lord reached the late Heaven-span Lord stage, his strength was monstrous. Even peak Heaven-span Lords couldn't do anything to him. However, it was at this time that the Yama Ghost Lord's nature was exposed. He became even more unscrupulous in the Xian, Mi heavenly domain. He began to massacre cultivators and annihilate forces. In that era, the Yama Ghost Lord had destroyed countless Dao palaces and Daoist sections. In fact, the Yama Ghost Lord had single-handedly wiped out several Dao palaces. All the cultivators killed by the Yama Ghost Lord had their corporeal bodies destroyed and their souls collected into the Yama Ghost diagram. The Yama Ghost diagram grew more and more powerful. In the past, the Yama Ghost Lord had relied on the Yama Ghost diagram to annihilate a peak heaven-span lord, shocking the entire Xian Mi heavenly domain. In the end, the Yama Ghost Lord's actions were simply too outrageous. He had even alarmed the original ruler of the Xian Mi heavenly domain, Daoist Three Purities. Zhuowen had heard from Huan Taiping about Daoist Three Purities. He knew that this so-called Daoist Three Purities was none other than the three domain rulers of the Hua, Xia Heaven Domain. Afterwards, after the three of them left the 8 celestial domains, they joined together and called themselves Laozi. He knew that Laozi was none other than the original ruler of the Xian Mi heavenly domain, Daoist Three Purities. But of course, Zhuowen also knew that the Three Purities had a very deep relationship with Pangu. They were formed from Pangu's primal divinity, and their status was on par with that of the 12 ancestral shamans. In the end, Daoist Three Purities had taken action. He had battled the Yama Ghost Lord for 10 days and 10 nights. In the end, he had slain the Yama Ghost Lord, and the Yama Ghost Lord's infamous weapon, the Yama Ghost diagram, had vanished without a trace. Zhuowen had never imagined that the infamous Yama Ghost diagram would actually be here. It seems that the flesh and blood of the cultivators in that underground room were used to cultivate the flower of the dead, while their souls were probably absorbed by the Yama Ghost diagram to repair itself. Zhuowen thought to himself, so the Yama Ghost diagram is actually here. It seems that your sect master found it and hid it here, Zhuowen said. The ghost plume lowered his head, not saying a word. He truly had no idea that the Yama Ghost diagram was here. Senki-in clearly hadn't told him about it. Zhuowen didn't find this strange. If he had found the Yama Ghost diagram as well, he definitely wouldn't have revealed it either. Everyone knew that a man's wealth was his own ruin. Bang! 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 Zhuowen's right hand formed into a claw as he struck out with lightning speed. He tapped the seal on the surface of the stone pillar, and the power of primordial infinity filled the surface of his right hand. It had to be said that the seal on the stone pillar was extremely powerful. Zhuowen had struck it for quite some time, but the seal didn't budge at all. It wasn't affected in the slightest. Zhuowen stopped and frowned. He realized that the monitoring array he had set up in the tunnel had been destroyed. He knew that the experts of the Yin Corpse sect were about to come down through the tunnel. Zhuowen picked up the ghost plume and left the magma space. He quickly rushed toward the corridor in the middle of the underground room. Not long after, he arrived at the corridor in the middle of the secret room. He faced a narrow tunnel and threw the ghost plume aside. He said coldly, "Stand at the entrance of this tunnel and try your best to lure the people who are about to come out in a killing array. Let their guard down. If you do this well, I promise to spare your life." The ghost plume's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly promised Zhuowen that he would do a good job. He stood at the entrance of the tunnel. As for Zhuowen, he was in the next corridor, looking at the cave through a crack. His aura was completely retracted, and he had already prepared his godly bow. He even took out his godly arrow and knocked it on the bowstring. He knew that the cultivators who were able to come down were definitely experts at the level of the elders of the 10 ultimate Corpse sect. Moreover, they were definitely ranked at the top of the list. He had to use his full strength to kill the experts who came down in one blow. This way, he could avoid an unnecessary bitter battle. Thump, thump, thump. Chapter 2890. Design ding, ding, ding. The sound of footsteps could be heard as 3 figures appeared at the entrance of the cave. The person in the lead was an old man in a loose robe. His aura was very powerful, like the vast starry sky. He was the 4th elder of the Corpse sect, Ba Jingwei. The 2 old men behind Ba Jingwei were naturally the 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho. Ba Jingwei's gaze was very cautious. Just now, when he was about a kilometer away from the exit, he had discovered a monitoring array formation. They knew that the person who had placed this monitoring array formation was very likely Zhuowen. However, the moment Ba Jingwei and the other 2 walked to the exit, they saw Gue Ling, who was already standing at the exit. The 3 of them revealed a surprised expression. "Martial nephew, Ghost Plume?" Ba Jingwei asked uncertainly. Ghost Plume nodded and sighed softly. "3 elders, you're finally here." "Martial nephew, Ghost Plume is fine. That's great." "Yes, I thought that something might have happened to Martial nephew Ghost Plume when we lost contact, but it turns out that he's fine." The 10th elder, Gu Hongkai, and the 8th elder, Mao Xinho, relaxed. They did not suspect anything and walked straight towards Ghost Plume. Ba Jingwei stopped the 2 of them. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho looked at Ba Jingwei in confusion. "Be careful," Ba Jingwei whispered to the 2, then looked at Ghost Plume and said, "Martial nephew Ghost Plume, you seem to be seriously injured, and your aura is very weak. What's going on? Also, where is Zhuowen now?" Ghost Plume did not mind Ba Jingwei's vigilance and sighed softly. "I entered this underground secret room before you all and followed you all the way until I found Zhuowen. This kid is very cunning. Not only did he destroy the first teleportation formation, he even found the location of the second teleportation formation and destroyed it as well. Fortunately, I came early. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have to enter this place through this passage like you all. However, that Zhuowen is not simple. He has many trump cards. I fought with him for a long time, and in the end, I used all my skills and finally killed him. However, I was also seriously injured and ended up in this state." Ghost Plume smiled helplessly. His tone was sincere, and the first impression he gave was that he was telling the truth. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho did not suspect anything, but Ba Jingwei was very cautious. He said in a deep voice, "Martial nephew, Ghost Plume, I found a monitoring array in the passage." "Martial nephew, are you telling me that you set it up?" As soon as Ba Jingwei said this, Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho also felt that something was wrong. They knew that Ghost Plume knew about the existence of this passage, but Ghost Plume had no reason to set up a monitoring array in the passage. After all, they were friends with Ghost Plume, not enemies. There was no need to set up a monitoring array in the passage. Ghost Plume did not panic and said with a smile, "That monitoring array was naturally not set up by me. It was set up by Zhuowen. This kid's spirit is abnormally powerful. He discovered this passageway in advance and is also very vigilant. He set up a monitoring formation here in advance, just in case. If Elder Ba hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have known that there was a monitoring formation in this passageway. Ba Jingwei took a deep look at Ghost Plume and frowned. He felt that something was wrong, but Ghost Plume did not look like Zhuowen in disguise and was indeed the real deal. Martial nephew Ghost Plume, can you prove that you really killed Zhuowen? Ba Jingwei suddenly asked. Ghost Plume's face suddenly became gloomy, and he quickly said, Elder Ba, are you doubting me? If you think that what I said is false, then you can choose not to believe me. You can even leave. When I recover, I will naturally return with Zhuowen's corpse. There is no need for Elder Ba and the others to trouble you. Martial nephew Ghost Plume, don't misunderstand. Elder Ba is just being careful. We came down to help you, so don't think too much about it. Gu Honkai and Mao Xinho hurriedly explained. They had heard of Ghost Plume's identity in the sect and knew why sect master Senki In took special care of Ghost Plume. Therefore, although they were elders, they did not dare to offend Ghost Plume too much. After all, we are all from the same sect, so I don't want to go too far. If the three elders don't believe me, you can follow me to the stone room in the depths. Zhuowen's body is there. Ghost Plume said somewhat angrily. Ba Jingwei's eyes flickered. When he thought of the three elders present, no matter how powerful Zhuowen was, it was impossible for him to be a match for them. So he let down his guard and cupped his fist to Ghost Plume and said, Martial nephew Ghost Plume, please take us to the stone room. Ghost Plume nodded, waved his hand, and left the exit. Ba Jingwei and the other two followed behind Gue Ling. However, as soon as they took a few steps, their expressions changed at the same time. This was because they felt a vast pressure sweeping up from all around them. It was as if it wanted to crush them to the ground. A terrifying killing intent raged like a wave, surging violently, causing all the hair on their bodies to stand on end. Killing array? Ba Jingwei quickly realized that something was wrong. The energy in his body surged as he coldly looked at Ghost Plume, who had left the range of the killing array. Martial nephew Ghost Plume, you tricked us? Why? Ba Jingwei asked in a deep voice. Gu Honkai and Mao Xinho also realized that something was wrong. They looked at Ghost Plume's back in puzzlement, unable to think of a reason for Ghost Plume to do this. Ghost Plume didn't turn his head, but continued to walk forward. At this moment, Zhuowen, who was hiding in another corridor, slowly walked out. He held a wooden bow in his right hand and knocked the divine arrow on the bowstring with his left hand. He slowly pulled the bowstring. In an instant, a terrifying killing intent descended like a solid mountain. A terrifying force spread through the corridor, causing the ground to tremble as if it was trembling from this killing intent. Ghost Plume, get lost. Zhuowen had already pulled the bowstring to a third of the way, and his killing intent had reached a terrifying level. Ghost Plume felt this killing intent, and his pupils shrank to the size of needles. He hurriedly ran to the corridor where Zhuowen was, but his heart was not calm at all. This was because he realized that the blood-stained arrow Zhuowen had taken out at this moment was many times stronger than the arrow that had almost killed him before. Ghost Plume had no doubt that if he were to face this blood-stained arrow again, he wouldn't be able to resist at all and would be killed on the spot. Thinking of this, Ghost Plume felt even more reverence for Zhuowen, and at the same time, a trace of fluke appeared in his heart. Fortunately, I was able to rely on Zhuowen in time. Otherwise, I would really be dead. Chapter 2891. Winner takes all, Zhuowen? Ghost Plume. Ba Jingwei's pupils shrank as he stared in disbelief at Ghost Plume, who was standing behind Zhuowen. He had never imagined that Ghost Plume would actually side with Zhuowen. Was this a joke? One of the 5 monstrous geniuses, the number 1 genius of the 10 Absolutes Corp sect, had actually sided with Zhuowen. Moreover, he had even helped the enemy deal with their own elder. Ba Jingwei felt as if he had just eaten shit. But soon, Ba Jingwei realized that now was not the time to be angry. The blood-stained arrow in Zhuowen's hand was simply too terrifying. The killing intent it exuded made Ba Jingwei feel as if he was facing the Grim Reaper. This is not good, it's the Divine Bow. Let's break the array. Ba Jingwei had once surrounded Xin with other experts, and his goal was to obtain the Ho-E Divine Bow. He had felt the terrifying, killing intent of the Ho-E Divine Bow. Although the wooden bow in Zhuan's hand had changed greatly, Ba Jingwei could not forget the terrifying killing intent it exuded. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho were both horrified as they desperately tried to break the array. They had also heard of the terrifying power of the Ho-E Divine Bow. Now that they felt the terrifying killing intent, the only thought in their minds was to run for their lives. They did not dare to stay here for long. Boom! The killing array was instantly shattered by the three of them. However, their expressions soon turned ugly as they discovered that this was a serial killing array. When they shattered one of the killing arrays, another terrifying killing array was triggered, trapping them inside. Die! Zhuo Wen's gaze was indifferent as he pulled the bowstring back to half of the curve. His killing intent actually increased by a few dozen times. With a whoosh, the blood-stained arrow left the bowstring. It was so fast that it turned into a streak of bloody light in the air. The arrow's power was terrifying. Wherever it passed, space-time collapsed, revealing the pitch-black space beneath. At this moment, Ba Jingwei and the other two had already destroyed the last killing array, and the blood-stained arrows had already arrived in front of them. Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho immediately summoned their divine artifacts and unleashed their full power to block the attack. Gu Hongkai then turned to Ba Jingwei and said, "Elder Ba, we will help you block this arrow. You go and capture that bastard Zhuan. Don't let him off so easily." However, as soon as Gu Hong said that, he cried out miserably. The god artifact before him shattered, and a sliver of bloody light pierced through his forehead. Blood splattered as he heavily fell to the ground dead. After Gu Hongkai was pierced by the blood-stained arrow, Mao Xinho's body trembled, and he couldn't help but retreat. However, the arrow seemed to have a mind of its own as it flew towards Mao Xinho. Mao Xinho was slightly more powerful than Gu Hongkai, and he was a late-stage god of creation. However, he was still unable to block the blood-stained arrows. The instant Mao Xinho came into contact with the arrows, he was instantly pierced through by the terrifying arrows. His life force was extinguished, and he followed in Gu Hongkai's footsteps. In just 2 breaths of time, Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho had both died to the Ho-E Divine Arrow. Ba Jingwei's heart was filled with fear. He discovered that the Ho-E Divine Bow in Zhuan's hands was even more terrifying than when it had been in Xion's hands. Ba Jingwei knew that this wasn't because the Ho-E Divine Bow had become stronger. Instead, it was because the blood-stained arrows shot out from Zhuan's hands were no ordinary arrows. With the enhancement of the Ho-E Divine Bow, they were far more powerful than ordinary arrows. Ba Jingwei continuously retreated. His divine artifact was a pair of round wheels that radiated a peerless golden light and flashed with terrifying brilliance. Although Ba Jingwei's wheels weren't creation-grade divine artifacts, they were infinitely close to being creation-grade divine artifacts. Coupled with Ba Jingwei's early-stage god of creation cultivation base, the power he could unleash was extremely terrifying. At this moment, Ba Jingwei was constantly retreating. His hands were like lightning as he brandished the wheels. Intense golden light erupted from them, and it was as if he were holding a scorching sun in each hand. Ba Jingwei continued to bombard the blood-colored arrows in front of him, causing the aftershocks to explode. However, he soon discovered that each of his attacks were pierced through by the blood-colored arrows. The blood-colored arrows were like a hot knife through butter, and Ba Jingwei's attacks were like paper tigers in front of him. Ba Jingwei roared angrily as he retreated to the end of the corridor. He began to burn his essence blood and unleashed all the potential in his body. The wheels in his hands were like exploding stars. The golden light was so terrifying that the entire underground chamber began to tremble violently. Fortunately, this underground chamber was personally arranged by Sun Qiyin, and the surface of the underground chamber was covered with many powerful spirit arrays. Otherwise, it would not have been able to withstand the power that Ba Jingwei had unleashed at this moment. Bang! 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 Ba Jingwei repeatedly bombarded the blood-stained arrows in front of him. Every time he struck, he would vomit blood and retreat a step. He was in a very sorry state, but he wasn't completely killed by the blood-stained arrows. Zhuowen stared at Ba Jingwei in shock. His complexion didn't look too good. It seemed that the strength of a creation gray divine artifact was somewhat beyond his expectations. Although Ba Jingwei was only an early-stage creation gray divine artifact, he was many times stronger than Gu Hongkai and Mao Xinho. Yet, he was able to forcibly resist the Ho-E divine arrows. This was the first time that Zhuowen had failed to shoot a Ho-E divine arrow. Bang! Ba Jingwei roared towards the sky. A terrifying bloody mist erupted from his body, and the wheels in his hands erupted with golden light that reached a terrifying level. Kacha! Ba Jingwei's wheels shattered into powder. A terrifying power spread out, causing the entire underground chamber to shake violently once more. The blood-stained arrows were knocked several inches off course by Ba Jingwei's power, piercing through Ba Jingwei's shoulder blades and stabbing into the rock wall behind him. Plop! Ba Jingwei spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to his knees. His face was so pale that he didn't look like a living person. Zhuowen slowly walked up to Ba Jingwei. Looking at the latter's twitching appearance and his increasingly weak aura, he knew that Ba Jingwei's life was about to come to an end. He was hanging on by a single breath. Given Ba Jingwei's current state, he didn't have the slightest bit of fighting power to speak of. He posed no threat to Zhuowen. Ba Jingwei raised his head with difficulty and stared at Zhuowen, his eyes filled with hatred. He could clearly sense that his life force was constantly fading away. He knew that he didn't have much time left. He hated. Originally, he had a bright future ahead of him, and he had come here full of ambition. He had wanted to capture Zhuowen and claim credit from the Grand Elder. But suddenly, he had been deceived as soon as he emerged from the passageway. Then, he had been ambushed by Zhuowen. Now that he was on the verge of death, he couldn't accept it. Ba Jingwei, the winner takes all. Don't look at me like that. Now that you've lost, you should be prepared to die, Zhuowen said indifferently. Chapter 2892. You're carrying the Ho-E Divine Bow on your back, aren't you? What's your relationship with you, Xin? Ba Jingwei asked weakly. It seems that you've recognized me. I have nothing to do with Senior Yu Xin. I just got the Ho-E Godly Bow by accident and promised Senior Yu Xin that I would help him fulfill his last wish, Zhuowen said calmly. What last wish? Ba Jingwei asked with difficulty. Help him kill 3 enemies, and you are one of the 3 people he must kill. Ba Jingwei, this is your karma. After saying that, Zhuowen pointed his right sword finger at Ba Jingwei's forehead. A terrifying energy burst out, and Ba Jingwei's divine soul was completely annihilated by Zhuowen. Ba Jingwei stared fixedly at Zhuowen. Finally, he fell to the ground, his body twitching as he lost all signs of life. Ghost Plume, who was standing behind Zhuowen, looked at the dead Ba Jingwei with a complicated expression. To be honest, Ba Jingwei's death had a lot to do with him. If he hadn't helped the evildoer, Ba Jingwei wouldn't have died so miserably. After killing Ba Jingwei, Zhuowen collected the spiritual rings of the 3 elders, including Ba Jingwei, and sent out 3 divine flames, burning the 3 elders' corpses to ashes. After doing this, Zhuowen put away the Ho-E Godly Arrow, took out an ordinary arrow from the macro world, and knocked it on the bowstring of the Ho-E Godly Bow. Then, he easily pulled the bowstring to 1/2. After Zhuowen's Panga's sacred body had reached the peak of the 5 stars, his strength had increased tremendously. Moreover, this was just an ordinary arrow, so it wasn't difficult for him to pull the bowstring to 1/2. However, Zhuowen still felt that it wasn't enough. He roared loudly and suddenly pulled the bowstring to 2/3 of the way. A terrifying killing intent erupted like an erupting volcano. It was very terrifying, and the momentum was vast and mighty. Puff! Blood seeped out from a corner of Zhuowen's mouth. A terrifying bloody mist erupted from his arms. Clearly, Pulling the bowstring of Ho E to 2/3 of its length was his limit. Zhuowen, what are you? Ghost Plume looked at Zhuowen's actions and asked in shock. Didn't you say it before? The Great Elder had to use his own strength to support the passage so that it wouldn't collapse. In other words, the Grand Elder should be at the entrance of the passageway, Zhuowen said indifferently. Ghost Plume thought of something and looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. You want to destroy this passage? Not only that, after Zhuowen finished speaking, he loosened his right hand and the arrow shot out with a whoosh. Its speed was as fast as lightning, and it instantly disappeared on the spot. The air resounded with continuous explosive sounds. The arrow entered the passageway, and, as if it had a mind of its own, it flew up along the passageway with monstrous killing intent. At the entrance of the passageway, the Great Elder, Gao Yanghong, formed a seal with his hands. A white brilliance surged out from his hands and entered the passageway. Gao Yanghong's expression was calm. He had just felt the tremors coming from the depths of the passageway. He knew that Ba Jingwei and the others had already met Zhuowen and were fighting. However, the tremors only lasted for a while before it stopped. He knew that Ba Jingwei had already dealt with Zhuowen. Gao Yanghong had never placed Zhuowen in his eyes. Perhaps Zhuowen was a genius among the younger generation, but in his eyes, Zhuowen was just an ant. This Zhuowen is an immortal master of the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, and he died in my 10 Extremities Corps sect. It seems that I have to fabricate an explanation. Otherwise, it will be difficult to explain to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance. It would be good if the sect master was still in the sect. With the sect master's prestige and his cooperation with Ji Wuming shouldn't be so greedy. Gao Yanghong muttered to himself and began to consider the consequences of killing Zhuowen. If Zhuowen was an ordinary cultivator, he naturally wouldn't care. However, Zhuowen was an immortal master of the Pill Array Immortal Alliance, which made things a little tricky. Just as Gao Yanghong was thinking about this, he seemed to sense a terrifying killing intent approaching him at an extremely fast speed. Gao Yanghong frowned, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately withdrew his hands and retreated. The instant he retreated, the killing intent was already very close to him. Gao Yanghong was finally able to clearly see that the source of the terrifying killing intent was actually an arrow. The arrow was like a black lightning bolt, and it instantly arrived in front of him. It was rudely aimed at his vitals. Gao Yanghong's eyes were gloomy. He made a move with both hands, and a powerful chi burst out. It tore through the space and quickly slapped the arrow. Bang! 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 Suddenly, there were continuous explosions in the space. Gao Yanghong groaned and kept retreating. He took 9 steps back in a row. His eyes were filled with anger. He roared, and the chi in his hands reached an extremely terrifying level. He quickly blasted it out, and it hit the middle of the arrow at an incredible angle. Finally, he used this skillful chi to smash the arrow into the ground. Boom! The arrow was stuck in the ground, and the whole ground emitted a dull sound. It produced a terrifying vibration, and countless cracks spread out. It was as if the earth was ushering in the end of the world. Gao Yanghong's breathing was disordered, and his eyes were gloomy. His hands were bleeding, and there were terrifying injuries. The arrow just now had caused him a lot of damage. However, what made Gao Yanghong even more furious was that the entrance to the passage ahead had collapsed. The impact of this collapse was a chain reaction. All the passages below had collapsed, and Gao Yanghong could feel the tremors from the collapse of the passage under his feet. He knew that the collapse of the passage meant that the last passage to the underground secret room was also abandoned. With Gao Yanghong's strength, it was not difficult for him to dig 3 feet into the ground and enter the secret room. But the problem was that the underground chamber was surrounded by terrifying spirit arrays and restrictions that Sun Qian had personally set up in the past. If he were to dig 3 feet into the underground chamber, he would likely be restrained by those terrifying spirit arrays and restrictions. Gao Yanghong had seen the spirit formations that Sun Qian had set up around the secret room. He knew how terrifying those spirit formations were. If he wanted to forcefully break through those spirit formations, he would have to pay a great price. He might even be seriously injured. Therefore, unless he had no other choice, Gao Yanghong did not plan to force his way into the secret room. I have to inform the sect master first. All the entrances to the secret room have been sealed. I can't go in, and Zhuowen can't come out. Gao Yanghong was not worried that Zhuowen would be able to escape. No matter how powerful Zhuowen was, he would not be able to break through the spirit formations around the secret room. Once the spirit formations were triggered, Gao Yanghong would immediately know. Then he would dig 3 feet into the ground to hunt down Zhuowen. Chapter 2893, Sealing Erasure, when looked at the tunnel exit that had completely collapsed, and his heart that had been hanging in the air finally settled down. However, Zhuowen was not completely at ease. He formed a seal with both hands and set up many trap and kill arrays at the exit of the tunnel. Only then did he stop. Zhuowen knew that the last tunnel had been sealed. If the experts of the 10 Ultimate Corps sect wanted to enter the secret underground chamber, they would have to force their way in from the outside. They would have to break through the layers of restriction arrays that Senki In had set up. Only then would they have a chance of entering the secret underground chamber. In the entire 10 Ultimate Corps sect, other than Senki In, there was no other cultivator who could break through the terrifying restriction arrays and enter the secret underground chamber unscathed. Even the great elder of the 10 Ultimate Corps sect, Gao Yanghong, could not do so. Zhuowen, you promised to let me live. Ghost Plume suddenly spoke when he saw that Zhuowen had destroyed the last tunnel. He was afraid that Zhuowen would kill him. After all, he was no longer of any use to Zhuowen. Zhuowen looked at Ghost Plume indifferently, and guess what Ghost Plume was thinking? He said indifferently, "Don't worry, I won't go back on my word. I will let you live, but not now. When the right time comes, I will let you go." After he finished speaking, Zhuowen put Ghost Plume into his great world and returned to the stone chamber in the deepest part of the cave. At this moment, in the cave below the altar, Xiaohei was commanding the Blood Immortal Sword and the Sacrificial Death Sword to guard the entrance. "Xiaohei, you guys can also enter this sovereign's great world. Leave the job of checking to this sovereign," Zhuowen said. Xiaohei nodded. After telling them to be careful, she took the Blood Immortal Sword and the Sacrificial Death Sword into the macro world. The macro world was huge. Xiaohei had carved out a large piece of land for his private cultivation cave. Blood Immortal Sword and Sacrificial Sword were Xiaohei's loyal followers. They basically lived in Xiaohei's private cave. Zhuowen had once entered Xiaohei's private cave abode and found all kinds of precious materials and ores that were rarely seen in the outside world. He knew that Xiaohei must have gotten a lot of good stuff behind his back. Furthermore, the sword catacomb that they had obtained previously was not an ordinary one. In addition to the various precious ores and materials that they had obtained in this underground secret room, Zhuowen knew that Xiaohei's level would rise very quickly in the near future. After Xiaohei returned to the macro world, Zhuowen left his great world to guard the entrance of the cave, while his doppelganger once again entered the magma sea in the underground cave. The doppelganger passed through the terrifying magma sea like a fish in water. It did not encounter any obstacles at all. Zhuowen came to the top of the stone pillar and continued to use the ultimacy Hongmeng Ji in conjunction with the formation flags to break the seal around the Yama ghost diagram. Unfortunately, Zhuowen busied himself for another half a day, but the seal remained unmoved and showed no signs of weakening. Zhuowen stopped what he was doing, and a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. When he was breaking the seal, just now, he had already discovered that the formation core of the seal was not on the surface, but he could not see where it was. He had always thought that the formation should be hidden. As he used the ultimacy Hongmeng Ji to break the seal, the hidden formation should be revealed. Unfortunately, he had tried twice in vain. He knew that the formation should not be at the top of the stone pillar. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the stone pillar below. This stone pillar was very tall and its surface was covered with complex lines. Each line exuded a sparkling light, showing its powerful aura and power. Zhuowen decided to use his spiritual consciousness to carefully explore this stone pillar. Sitting cross-legged not far from the Yama ghost diagram, Zhuowen's glabella emitted a golden light. His terrifying spiritual consciousness swept out like an angry dragon and flowed down the top of the stone pillar towards the bottom. It had to be said that the suppression of Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness in this place was even more terrifying. When Zhuowen's spiritual consciousness extended to about the middle of the stone pillar, it seemed to have encountered a powerful obstacle and began to find it difficult to go down. Zhuowen's eyes were firm. He stimulated the Panga banner in his divine soul. With the help of the Panga banner's power, his spiritual consciousness suddenly strengthened a lot. He rushed to the bottom and went deep into the magma. It had been some time since Zhuowen obtained the Panga banner. Although he still couldn't completely control the Panga banner, he was much better at using it than before. At least now, he could borrow the power of the Panga banner to strengthen his spirit and his consciousness instantly. The speed of his spiritual consciousness was very fast. It went all the way to the bottom of the magma, where the stone pillar was located. His eyes suddenly revealed a sharp light that could not be ignored. The formation I is here. No wonder I have no clue after so long. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He stood up and simply drilled into the magma at the bottom of the stone pillar. The moment Zhuowen entered the magma, he felt as if he had entered a furnace. However, his Panga's sacred body was, after all, integrated with the power of the Zhurong poisonous insect. Naturally, he could completely withstand the high temperature of the magma. Zhuowen went to the bottom of the magma and found that the stone pillar was inserted in the soil at the bottom of the magma. On the soil, there was a half-meter wide formation. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He knew that this was the formation eye of the seal restriction. Furthermore, he also discovered that the energy of the lines on the surface of the stone pillar was transmitted from the eye of the formation, thus forming such a vast sealing array. A creation-level seal formation. Zhuowen's expression turned ugly when he saw the true state of the array core. His current level of formation Dao was at most at the peak of the eternal level. It was not a problem for him to break a creation-level formation by relying on Hongmeng Wuji. However, it was a little difficult for him to break a creation-level formation. Or rather, with his current level, it was impossible for him to break a creation-level formation. However, Zhuowen was not discouraged. Instead, he took out the True Alchemy Array record and flipped through it. He remembered that in the sealing chapter of the True Alchemy Array record, there was a secret method that could forcibly destroy the formation eye of the seal formation. However, this secret method had a very strong side effect. It needed to absorb more than 70% of the essence qi in the caster's body. There was a warning in the True Alchemy Array record that this secret method must not be used casually. This was because when most spellcasters used this arcane technique, after breaking the powerful sealing circle, they would die of exhaustion due to the loss of too much essence. It could be said that using this secret method was equivalent to using one's life to break the formation. Zhuowen pondered for a moment and decided to use this secret method. The Yama Ghost diagram was a sky-level divine weapon. It should be known that there were only a few divine weapons of this level in the entire Xian Mi heavenly domain. Chapter 2894. Breaking the formation. If he could obtain the Yama Ghost diagram, Zhuowen would undoubtedly have another trump card that was more powerful than Ho Yi's divine arrow. Since he had found such a thing, how could he let it go? Moreover, Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body was full of essence energy, which was incomparable to that of ordinary cultivators. In addition, he had many dead flowers with him. The essence energy of these flowers was enough to give him the confidence to use such a terrifying secret method. Thinking of this, Zhuowen did not hesitate and began to comprehend the secret method in the sealing chapter of the True Alchemy Array record. After Zhuan completely comprehended the secret method, he came in front of the sealing formation. He formed a complicated seal with both hands and began to use the secret method. In an instant, Zhuan felt as if the essence energy in his body had been emptied. The essence energy broke out of his body and turned into bright red blood energy, which turned into complicated blood-red runes between Zhuan's hands. The blood-red runes were as dense as ants. They flew out of Zhuan's hands and landed on the formation in front of him. Zhuan could clearly feel that the moment the blood-red runes landed on the surface of the formation, the seemingly indestructible sealing formation began to tremble. Seeing that the secret method was effective against the sealing formation, Zhuan became excited and worked even harder to break the formation. However, at the same time, he also found that the essence energy in his body was rapidly flowing away and being transformed into the power of the blood-red runes. The loss of essence energy was too fast. Even though Zhuan had the Panga's sacred body, he could not bear it. However, Zhuan was not in a hurry. He took out the dead flowers that he had collected from the outside world and began to absorb the essence energy in them to make up for the loss of essence energy in his body. It had to be said that the dead flowers were indeed very useful. The surging essence energy contained in them completely made up for the essence energy that Zhuan had lost. With the supply of essence energy from the dead flowers, Zhuan did not have too many scruples when using the secret method. Time passed by. After about half a day, the surface of the sealing formation at the bottom of the stone pillar finally began to crack. The cracks continued to spread, and finally, the array formation collapsed. The moment the formation collapsed, the shining lines on the surface of the stone pillar in the magma instantly dimmed, turning it into a very ordinary stone pillar. Zhuan let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the dead man flower that was about to be used up by him, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. It had to be said that the side effects of the secret technique were too great. He had actually used up all the dead man flowers he had on him. One had to know that there were over 1,000 dead man flowers that Zhuan had plundered from the stone room. Now, almost all of them had been used up. It could be seen that this secret technique had consumed a lot of Zhuan's essence. Zhuan also knew that if he hadn't obtained these dead man flowers, using the secret technique would be courting death. After jumping out of the magma, Zhuan returned to the top of the stone pillar. The sealing barrier at the top of the stone pillar had collapsed at this moment, and the Yama's ghost diagram floated quietly in the air. Billowing black chi lingered around the Yama's ghost diagram, revealing a mysterious aura. Boy, be careful. I have a hunch that this Yama's ghost diagram is very terrifying. Although I can feel the dilapidated aura from it, and guess that this Yama's ghost diagram must be seriously damaged, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. After all, this thing used to be a heaven-grade divine artifact. Its power is terrifying. Xiao He came out of the outside world and landed beside Zhuan, looking at the Yama's ghost diagram in front of them with dread. Xiao He was an artifact cultivator, relying on her own cultivation to reach the eternal grade divine artifact. She was very sensitive to the aura of high-grade divine artifacts. Since Xiao He was so cautious, Zhuan naturally would not take it lightly. "I'll be careful," Zhuan said, then walked up to the Yama's ghost diagram. After hesitating for a moment, he reached out with his right hand, intending to put it into his bag. However, the moment Zhuan's right hand touched the Yama's ghost diagram, the black chi on the surface of the Yama's ghost diagram suddenly gushed out, drowning Zhuan's entire figure in the black chi. Xiao He, who was observing from a distance, paled and immediately rushed in. But soon, with a muffled groan, he was swept away by the black chi and flew out in an extremely sorry state. Xiao He's face did not look too good. He rushed in several times, but was washed away by the terrifying energy of the black chi. In the end, the brilliance on the surface of the Thunderfire sword almost dimmed, and its strength was greatly reduced. Xiao He's eyes were filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. Seeing the black chi in front of him transform into a demonic palm that quickly swept over, trying to catch Xiao He and tear him apart, Xiaohei let out an unwilling roar and left this place. He wanted to return to the cave to discuss with his main body. He knew that his main body had a close connection with his doppelganger, so his main body would know immediately if something happened to his doppelganger. Zhuowen looked at the pitch-black space around him, and his face was somewhat ugly. He was probably in the inner space of a Yama's ghost diagram, but he did not know why the Yama's ghost diagram wanted to suck him in. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of water dripping came from the front, and then Zhuowen saw a pair of huge eyes appear in the darkness in front of him. The eyes were emitting a purple flame, and they were faintly shining. It was very strange. Artifact spirit, Zhuowen asked with uncertainty. Hee. Junior, thank you for unlocking the seal of the Yama's ghost diagram. I have been trapped here for too long, and I can't even remember who I am. However, I still want to thank you for freeing me. In order to repay you, you will be my food, merge into my body, and climb to the peak with me to enjoy supreme glory. The huge monster in the darkness had a sharp voice, and it sneered coldly. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed Zhuowen. Zhuowen could not move at all, and could only watch as he was swallowed by the huge monster. But soon, the Panga banner in his divine soul emitted a blazing light and suddenly swept out. Then, Zhuowen heard a scream, and the darkness in front of him was completely dispelled. His vision also opened up a lot, and he finally saw the real face of the huge monster in front of him. It was a strange beast with a human head and a tiger's body. Its whole body was filled with black qi, and its eyes were burning with purple flames, looking very strange. This is the Panga banner? How can a human like you have such a thing? Impossible. When the strange beast saw the Panga banner that was suppressing him, it looked very flustered and helpless, as if it had lost its soul. What are you? Are you the artifact spirit of the Yama's ghost diagram? Zhuowen asked coldly. The moment he was swallowed by the strange beast, cold sweat broke out all over his body, and he felt a life-and-death crisis. If it were not for the Panga banner, he would have been a corpse by now. I'm the artifact spirit of a Yama's ghost diagram. Sir, I didn't mean to offend you just now. I won't dare to do it again next time. Let me go. The strange beast begged for mercy. Chapter 2895. The Remnant Consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord. Were you trying to take over my body just now? How can an artifact spirit like you take over a cultivator's body? Zhuowen formed a lightning whip with his divine power and lashed it at the strange beast, causing it to grimace in pain. Zhuowen knew that his soul had left his body and was forcefully pulled out of his body by the strange beast into the Yama Ghost portrait. The strange beast wanted to devour his soul just now, so it was obvious that it wanted to take over his body. Generally speaking, artifact spirits were unable to take over a cultivator's body. Otherwise, everything would be a mess. However, this strange beast wanted to take over his body, so it was obvious that this strange beast was not a real artifact spirit. Zhuowen suspected that this strange beast might be a cultivator's soul in disguise. Sure enough, when Zhuowen said this, the strange beast frowned and fell into silence. I don't have the patience to question you, and I'm in a hurry. Since you don't want to tell me, I have my own ways to find out. Zhuowen's eyes were cold as he stepped to the side of the strange beast. His right hand was like lightning as he grabbed the strange beast's head, and a powerful spiritual energy surged out. The strange beast felt Zhuowen's killing intent and hurriedly opened its mouth, indicating that it was willing to tell the truth. Too late. Zhuowen did not hesitate to destroy the strange beast. At the same time, he collected all the memory fragments in the strange beast, wanting to check its complete memories. Under the suppression of the Panga banner, this strange beast was basically powerless. That was why Zhuowen was able to kill it so easily. After checking the strange beast's memories, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He finally knew the strange beast's identity. So it's a remnant consciousness of a Yama Ghost Lord. No wonder when I approached the Yama Ghost portrait, it wanted to take over my body so anxiously. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He felt lucky that he had the Panga banner on him. Otherwise, he would have been successfully taken over by the remnant consciousness of a Yama Ghost Lord. Zhuowen knew very well that once the Yama Ghost Lord successfully possessed his body, he would definitely be able to make a comeback with his talent. And he, Zhuowen, would become his sacrificial lamb. But soon, Zhuowen's heart became extremely hot. He had obtained the memories of a Yama Ghost Lord, which meant that he knew the trick to controlling the Yama Ghost portrait. After all, this thing was created by the Yama Ghost Lord. No one knew the Yama Ghost portrait better than the Yama Ghost Lord. Let's leave this Yama demon diagram first. With a thought, Zhuowen began to control the Yama Ghost diagram according to the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord. To his surprise, the Yama Ghost diagram really sent his soul out. At this moment, the black smoke outside the stone pillar dissipated. Zhuowen stood stiffly in front of the Yama demon portrait with his eyes slightly closed. But soon, Zhuowen opened his eyes. He looked at the Yama demon portrait in front of him and felt extremely hot. After knowing the memories of a Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness, he knew very well how terrifying the power of the Yama demon portrait was. Although the Yama demon portrait was damaged now, it had recovered a lot over the years and had begun to have the power of a divine artifact. What surprised Zhuowen even more was that the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had been trapped here for a long time and had been looking for a way to leave this place. Over the years, the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had left this secret space more than once to study the array formation outside and finally found a way to break it. The Yama Ghost Lord was only waiting to be able to take over the body of a cultivator and leave this place at any time. In the future, he would be able to live freely. Unfortunately, the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness had made all of this a wedding dress for Zhuowen. After leaving the sea of lava and returning to the entrance of the cave, Xiao He and his original body hurriedly came to greet him. "Kid, are you all right?" Xiao He asked worriedly. Zhuowen smiled and waved his hand, saying, "I'm fine. I'll take you out of here now." Xiao He looked at Zhuowen strangely and said, "Kid, didn't you destroy all the passages in this underground secret space? Do you have any other way to leave this place? Just follow me." Zhuowen merged his original body and doppelganger into one and put Xiao He into his macro world. Then, he re-entered the sea of lava. He came to the bottom of the stone pillar and smashed it to dust with a punch. Then, a black tunnel appeared under the stone pillar. This black tunnel was very mysterious. The lava was on top of this black tunnel, but the lava did not flow into this black tunnel. It was as if there was a transparent barrier at the entrance of the black tunnel that separated the lava. However, Zhuowen knew that there were no restrictions at the entrance of this black tunnel. He entered the black tunnel and continued forward. This black tunnel was opened up by the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness over the years. It led to the core of the formation outside the underground secret space. After a while, Zhuowen walked out of the black tunnel and left the underground secret space. What greeted him was a series of formations that emitted flowing light. Zhuowen followed the memories of the Yama Ghost Lord's remnant consciousness and arrived in front of one of the formations. He knew that this was the weakest part of all the formations. It was also the core of the formation. As long as he could break this core, he would be able to leave this place. Yama Ghost Lord was indeed a genius. Although he had only left behind a remnant consciousness, he still found a way to break this core. Zhuowen only took half an hour to break the core of the formation. However, Zhuowen did not destroy the entire formation. He only opened up a hole that was about the size of a person at the core of the formation and quietly left this place. With his ability, he could naturally destroy the entire formation. However, he did not dare to do so because it would cause too much of a commotion. It would attract the attention of the experts in the sect. At that time, the gains would not make up for the losses. After all, Zhuowen had not left the territory of the Ten Extremities En Corps sect. If the experts of the Ten Extremities En Corps sect found him now, it would be very difficult for him to leave the territory of the Ten Extremities En Corps sect. After walking out of the formation, Zhuowen took out the space-time roulette and began to travel through the underground secret space. Zhuowen could not tell the direction at the moment, so he just randomly chose a direction and quietly moved forward. Once he was completely out of the territory of the Ten Extremities Corpse sect, he would leave the underground secret space and return to the Pill Array Immortal Alliance to tell Ji Wuming about the Dead Man Flower. While Zhuowen was escaping through the underground secret space, the sect leader of the Ten Extremities Corpse sect, Senki Yin, returned, causing a huge uproar in the sect. Inside the sect leader's cave, the great elder Gao Yanghong stood respectfully to the side. In front of him stood a straight figure. This was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. However, he was as thin as a match. Even the loose robe he wore could not hide his emaciated figure. Although the middle-aged man looked thin and weak, his eyes exuded a lofty majesty. It was obvious that he had been in a high position for a long time. This man was the sect leader of the Ten Extremities Corpse sect, Senki Yin. It was said that his strength was extremely terrifying. In the host region, he was one of the top experts. At this moment, Senki Yin was standing beside a small pond in the sect's cave. His eyes were gloomy, and his skinny arms were exposed. He was constantly forming hand seals. Soon, the transportation formation in the small pond emitted a milky white light. Yanghong, come with me. I want to see what kind of person Zhuowen is. He actually dared to break into my secret underground chamber, kill my sect's cultivators, and even destroy the passage leading to the secret underground chamber. Senki Yin flew to the top of the formation and called Gao Yanghong down. Gao Yanghong respectfully flew to Sun Qiyin's side. His eyes were full of awe. He secretly thought that Sun Qiyin was indeed worthy of being the sect master. He was able to completely repair the damaged transmission array in the underground chamber through the transmission array here. Chapter 2896. The enraged Senki Yin with a flash of white light. Senki Yin and Gao Yanghong disappeared from the teleportation array. When Sun Qiyin and Gao Yanghong arrived at the stone chamber in the depths of the underground, they were dumbfounded when they saw that the surrounding stone chamber had been plundered. Even the 9 primitive dead man flowers in the middle of the stone chamber had disappeared. After a long time, Senki Yin roared. His eyes were red with anger. There were over 1,000 mature dead man flowers and 9 primitive dead man flowers in the depths of the underground. The 9 primitive dead man flowers were especially precious. They were the source of all the dead man flowers. The reason why they could cultivate so many dead man flowers was because of the seeds produced by the primitive dead man flowers. If they had only lost over 1,000 mature dead man flowers, Senki Yin would have been heartbroken, but he wouldn't have been so furious. After all, the mature dead man flowers could be cultivated again. It was only a matter of time. However, all 9 primitive dead man flowers had been taken away. Senki Yin was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He even had the urge to kill someone. In order to cultivate the 9 primitive dead man flowers, he had spent too much effort and put in a lot of effort. He had spent close to 10,000 years to achieve today's results. Now that all 9 primitive dead man flowers have been taken away by Zhuowen, how could Senki Yin not be angry? Gao Yanghong also stared blankly at the empty stone room. When he sensed the terrifying killing intent from Senki Yin, his body trembled. He knew that the sect master was truly enraged. Sect master, there seems to be traces of a formation under the altar. Gao Yanghong noticed the empty space under the altar and suddenly reminded Senki Yin. Senki Yin was furious, so he didn't notice the abnormality under the altar. Now that Gao Yanghong had reminded him, he carefully examined it. Sure enough, he discovered that there was something wrong under the altar. He thought of something, and his face changed. He formed a seal with both hands and broke the barrier under the altar. Suddenly, the hole that Zhuowen had blasted out was exposed. A heat wave rushed out, and the gloomy stone room was illuminated in red. Sect Master, below, is... Gao Yanghong looked at Senki Yin suspiciously. This was the first time he had seen a completely different world beneath the altar. Senki-in had never told him about it before. Senki-in didn't say anything and hurriedly entered the cave. Gao Yanghong was puzzled, but he still followed him in. He discovered that there was a sea of lava below. In the middle of the magma sea stood a huge stone pillar. The surface of the stone pillar was covered with dense patterns, but these patterns were very dim at the moment. Moreover, this stone pillar was lying crookedly on the sea of lava. It was obvious that the bottom of the stone pillar had been destroyed by someone, causing the stone pillar to be in such a strange state. Senki-in had already landed on the top of the stone pillar. He then let out an earth-shaking roar. A powerful sound wave spread out in a ring shape in all directions. Boom! The stone pillar that seemed to be supporting the heavens suddenly cracked and shattered into countless pieces. Under Senki-in's terrifying power, the entire sea of lava was set off terrifying waves of lava. Gao Yanghong's face changed slightly. He retreated until he reached the edge and looked at Senki-in in horror. This was the first time he had seen Senki-in so angry. In particular, the aura that Senki-in had erupted with made him very afraid. He wanted to worship him and didn't dare to go against him. Gao Yanghong understood that this was the terror of a master of heaven ascension. Although Senki-in was only at the early stage of the master of heaven ascension, it was enough to kill him in one move. Thinking of this, Gao Yanghong revered Senki-in even more. He didn't dare to have the slightest disobedience in his heart. After venting for a while, Senki-in drilled into the lava and reached the bottom of the stone pillar. But soon, Senki-in returned. His face was gloomy. He had discovered the exit at the bottom of the stone pillar and the crack in the formation outside the exit. He knew that Zhuowen had escaped through that crack. Senki-in knew that with Zhuowen's strength and experience, it was impossible for him to break the formation he had set up around the underground secret room in such a short time. Moreover, the exit at the bottom of the stone pillar had been dug out a long time ago. It should have been done by the remnant consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord. Damn it! I should have completely destroyed the remnant consciousness of the Yama Ghost Lord back then. I actually let this guy take advantage of the loophole. Zhuowen must have been possessed by the Yama Ghost Lord and escaped through the passage he had prepared. Senki-in thought to himself, Sect leader, has Zhuowen already escaped? Gao Yanghong asked cautiously. Senki-in said coldly, he has escaped. Yanghong, pass down my order. Immediately seal off the transmission formations of all the forces in the domain under the jurisdiction of the 10 Ultimate In-Corp sect. At the same time, seal off the entrances and exits of the domain. That Zhuowen stole all the experimental data of the Dead Flower and the original Dead Flower. He also killed 3 of our sect's elders and the Ghost Plume. He must not be allowed to live. He must die here. Gao Yanghong received the order and left. He began to make arrangements in the sect and issued a warrant for Zhuowen's arrest. It had to be said that the In-Corp sect of the 10 Ultimates acted very quickly. In just half a day, the In-Corp sect of the 10 Ultimates, as well as all the forces in the domain under its jurisdiction, had stopped using the teleportation formations. Furthermore, Zhuowen's arrest warrant had spread throughout the streets and alleys. Zhuowen's name could be said to be known by everyone. At the same time, the 10 great elders of the 10 Ultimate In-Corp sect were all mobilized. Even the great elder, Gao Yanghong, joined the search team. The Great Spirit sect was a force at the border of the domain under the jurisdiction of the 10 Ultimate In-Corp sect. Of course, the Great Spirit sect was only a Taoist sect level force. In the domain under the jurisdiction of the 10 Ultimate In-Corp sect, it was only a small force that could not make a splash. After all, in the domain of the 10 Ultimate In-Corp sect, there were countless Taoist sect-level forces and even more Taoist sect-level forces. Among the many Taoist sect-level forces, the Great Spirit sect could only be regarded as a bottom-level force. In addition, the Great Spirit sect's talents had withered in recent years and was gradually declining. It was about to fall out of the ranks of Taoist sect-level forces and become a member of countless ordinary forces. Moreover, the way the Great Spirit sect chose its successor was completely different from other sections. When other sects chose the successor of the sect master, they naturally chose the strongest person among the younger generation. However, the Great Spirit sect was different. This sect did not choose its successor based on talent or strength. Instead, it relied on God's providence. The so-called God's providence was a technique passed down by the sect master of the Great Spirit sect. It was said to be a Tao technique that could deduce one's fate. It was said that the founder of the Great Spirit sect had accidentally obtained the God's providence secret. After studying it for countless years, he finally comprehended a trace of it. Thus, he sought fortune and avoided calamity. He founded the Great Spirit sect and led the Great Spirit sect to the peak. When the founder of the Great Spirit sect chose the next sect master, he used the God's providence technique to deduce the next sect master. Chapter 2897. Giant Spirit Sect. Today, the area where the Giant Spirit sect was located was filled with thunderstorms. Thunderbolts descended from the sky like angry dragons, and the deafening sound was like the roar of a giant dragon. In the sect master's hall of the Giant Spirit sect, all the upper echelons of the sect stood in the hall. In front of the hall, a white-haired old man was lying on a bed. His aura was weak, like a candle in the wind, as if he would die at any time. An extremely beautiful woman with a cold temperament held the old man's withered arm with a jade-like hand. The coldness on her face had long been replaced by sadness. "Grandpa, don't use the divine divination technique anymore. Your body won't be able to bear it." The beautiful woman kept persuading the old man. Unfortunately, the old man was like a demon. The 5 fingers of his empty left hand were constantly forming complicated seals. If one looked carefully, one could see that there was a mysterious power lingering in the old man's left hand. This power even transcended the heavenly Tao. It was very mysterious and strange. The old man's eyes were blurred, as if his soul was wandering outside the heavens. "I don't have much time left. Before I die, I must use the divine divination technique to calculate who will be the next sect master of our Giant Spirit sect. Otherwise, I will let down my ancestors." Although the old man's eyes were blurred, as if he was absent-minded, he still heard the beautiful woman's words and muttered softly. The beautiful woman sighed in her heart. In the end, she did not persuade him anymore. Instead, she silently guarded the old man. In the hall, the other upper echelons also stood silently, not saying a word. But at the same time, they hoped that the next sect master that the old man calculated would be one of them. In a remote valley hundreds of miles away from the Giant Spirit sect, a figure slowly crawled out of the soil in the northeast corner of the valley. Rain poured down along with the violent thunder, dripping on this person's body. However, it seemed to be blocked by a transparent barrier. This was a rather handsome young man with shoulder-length black hair that fluttered in the wind. This person was Zhuowen. His expression was very ugly. Over the past half a month, he had been heading west and very quickly found the nearest force. Originally, he had wanted to use the teleportation array in that force to completely leave the area under the jurisdiction of the 10 Extremes Encorp sect. However, what he did not expect was that all the teleportation formations of this force had been sealed. These teleportation formations could only teleport to the inner regions of the 10 Extreme Encorp sect. They could not teleport to the outer regions of the 10 Extreme Encorp sect. Moreover, he also found out that he was on the wanted list of the 10 Extremes Encorp sect. Once he was exposed, he would be hunted down by all the cultivators in the 10 Extremes Encorp sect. Zhuowen was cautious and did not act rashly. Instead, he continued to hide and headed west. However, as he passed by one force after another, Zhuowen's heart grew heavier and heavier. This was because he discovered that the teleportation arrays of all the forces within the 10 Extremities Encorp sect's domain had been sealed. His plan to use the teleportation array to escape the Ten Extremities Corp sect had been foiled. He knew very well that the teleportation array was only for internal forces and not external forces. He could not use the teleportation array to teleport out of the Ten Extremities Corp sect's domain, but the experts of the Ten Extremities Corp sect could use the teleportation array in the sect to come to his sphere of influence. Therefore, once Zhuon alerted this force, the only outcome was that he would be besieged by an endless stream of experts from the Ten Extremities Corp sect. Although Zhuon was confident and had enough trump cards, he was not confident that he could fight a Dao Palace-level force like the Ten Extremities Corp sect alone. After all, he was still too weak. When faced with an early-stage creation realm expert like Ba Jingwei, he had to use the Ho-E Divine Bow and Ho-E Divine Arrows to barely kill him. In the Ten Extremities Corp sect, there were 3 elders who were stronger than Ba Jingwei. In addition, the sect master Senki Yin was terrifying, and there were many other experts working together. If Zhuon went up against them, he would be digging his own grave. After knowing that it was impossible to leave the Ten Extremities Corp sect through the teleportation array, Zhuon could only go all the way west. He wanted to go directly to the boundary of the Ten Extremities Corp sect to take a look. Although he knew that the boundary of the Ten Extremities Corp sect was probably very heavily guarded, he knew that this was his only way. Otherwise, he could not think of any other way to leave the Ten Extremities Corp sect. This should be the westernmost area. It's not far from the boundary of the Ten Extremities Corp sect's western boundary. I remember that there seems to be a sect on the border. Zhuon muttered to himself. As he was going all the way west, he had secretly bought a detailed map of the Ten Extremities Corp sect's boundary. He knew that there was a sect near the boundary. He remembered that it was the Giant Spirit sect. Moreover, it was recorded in the map that the Giant Spirit sect was the only way to get to the exit of the western boundary. In other words, Zhuon had to pass through the Giant Spirit sect. Zhuon sighed softly and began to change his appearance. He changed from an ordinary young man to a young man with 2 hideous scars on his face. Even the aura on his body was completely changed by him. His cultivation was also suppressed from Lord of Mystery to Lord of Heavenly Tao. Zhuon had learned about the Giant Spirit sect. He knew that the Giant Spirit sect was only a Taoist-level force. Moreover, it was a Taoist-level force that was gradually declining. There were no experts in it. Basically, no one in the Giant Spirit sect could see through his disguise, unless it was an expert above the eternal rank. In the Giant Spirit sect, there was obviously no such expert. Therefore, Zhuon was not worried that he would be exposed in the Giant Spirit sect when he disguised himself as the scarred young man. The only thing that Zhuon was worried about was that the experts that the Ten Extremities Corp sect had placed at the boundary would definitely be able to see through his disguise. At that time, if it really did not work, Zhuon could only force his way in. Of course, this was the last resort. If there was a good plan, Zhuon would not choose to force his way in. After the disguise was completed, Zhuon's expression changed slightly. He sensed a mysterious force appearing in the void in front of him. There, he found a pair of illusory eyes. These eyes were turbid but bright. A mysterious force flowed around them. This mysterious force was very mysterious. It gave Zhuon a feeling that it surpassed the heavenly Tao. It was as if these eyes were staring at him, and all his secrets were being seen through. This pair of illusory eyes glanced at Zhuon. Immediately, there was a look of horror in its eyes. It then fled in panic. Zhuon snorted coldly. His right hand pinched toward the sky. Countless thunderbolts gathered around the valley and fell into the illusory eyes. Then, a shrill scream came from the illusory eyes. Chapter 2898. He kept feeling that the mysterious power exuding from the eye of nothingness gave him a very familiar feeling. This familiar feeling reminded him of Yin Tianwei from the prophet family, who possessed the divination Holy Talisman. Back then, Yin Tianwei could use the divination Holy Talisman to predict the future and avoid calamity. The aura emitted from his body was somewhat similar to the mysterious power emitted from the Eye of Nothingness. Of course, Yin Tianwei's strength was far from being comparable to the Eye of Nothingness, but his essence was somewhat similar. This made Zhuowen think of fate. Whether it was Yin Tianwei's ability to predict the future or the Eye of Nothingness's aura of prying into fortune or misfortune, they all seemed to be closely related to fate. Fate was a very mysterious thing. It could be said that in this world, everyone's fate was different. It was the same principle as there were no identical leaves in the world. Zhuowen revealed a pondering expression. The strength of the Eye of Nothingness that appeared just now shouldn't be that great. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Zhuowen to injure the owner of the Eye of Nothingness with just a little lightning. Zhuowen didn't pay too much attention to it. Instead, he left the valley in large strides and rushed towards the giant spirit sect that was hundreds of miles away. At this moment, in the sect master's hall of the giant spirit sect, the old man lying on the bed suddenly screamed. Tears of blood actually flowed out of his eyes. His body twitched, and his aura became even more bleak, as if he would disappear at any time. The beautiful woman next to the old man trembled. She hurriedly grabbed the old man's arm and said with a sobbing tone, "Grandfather, what's wrong? Hurry up and stop the divination technique. Your body can't take it anymore." Just as the beautiful woman finished speaking, the old man suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were blood red and looked very frightening. Everyone in the hall held their breaths. They knew that when the old man opened his eyes, it meant that the divination technique had ended. It also meant that the old man had seen who the next sect master of the giant spirit sect was. Although they felt that the old man's current state was very strange, they didn't take it to heart. Instead, they held their breaths and wanted to hear the old man's next words. "Pucci." The old man abruptly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, tightly grasped the beautiful woman beside him, and said intermittently, "In a valley a few hundred kilometers away, there's a young man with 2 scars on his face. He's Tom." As soon as the old man said the word connect, his voice suddenly stopped. After that, his entire body fell backwards, and the aura on his body completely dissipated. He had actually died just like that. No. The beautiful woman lay on the old man's body and cried bitterly. The entire hall was filled with her cries. As for the people in the hall, their faces were filled with disappointment. They understood what the old man meant. The next sect leader was not any of them, but a young man with 2 scars on his face. "Miss Ryu, don't be too sad. My condolences. You see, the sect master didn't even say who the next sect master would be. I think the sect master's successor should be chosen by everyone in the sect." A middle-aged man with sharp eyes walked out. Although his words were comforting, his tone was very unyielding and didn't have the slightest intention of comforting. When this middle-aged man appeared, the hall instantly became deathly silent. Everyone looked at this middle-aged man with fear. Obviously, this middle-aged man wasn't a simple person in the giant spirit sect. "Chen Yuan Shui, my grandfather just passed away." "What do you mean by this?" "Also, didn't you hear what my grandfather said before he passed away? He said that in a valley a few hundred kilometers away from the sect, there's a young man with 2 scars on his face. That young man is our giant spirit sect's new sect master." The woman called Ryu's beautiful face regained its cold temperament. She coldly looked at the middle-aged man and spoke very impolitely. Chun Yuanshui narrowed his eyes and sneered. "The sect master only said that there's such a young man. He didn't say that this young man would be the new sect master. Miss Ryu, you're thinking too much. I think that's it. The sect master just passed away. The sect can't be without a leader for a day. Now, everyone will vote to decide who the next sect master is." As he spoke, Chen Yuanshui's gaze looked around at everyone. All the cultivators who met Chen Yuanshui's gaze subconsciously lowered their heads and said yes. Chen Yuanshui was an expert in the giant spirit sect whose strength was second only to the sect master. Moreover, Chun Yuanshui's methods were ruthless and especially vengeful. Most of the people who offended Chun Yuanshui ended up very miserable. In the past, because of the old sect master suppression, Chun Yuanshui's actions in the sect could be considered restrained. But now that the old sect master had just passed away, Chun Yuanshui immediately began to jump out. Moreover, he was unscrupulous and seemed to regard himself as the sect master. "What? Are you looking down on me, or what?" Chun Yuanshui's voice became a little cold. He looked at everyone with an unfriendly gaze. Everyone was immediately frightened by Chun Yuanshui's words and immediately agreed. They all believed that the next sect master was Chun Yuanshui and that it was unreasonable for the position of sect master not to be passed to Chun Yuanshui. Ruoyu was so angry that her chest violently heaved up and down. She coldly said, "Elder Chun, you do have the qualifications and the strength. But now that my grandfather has just passed away, the position of sect master will have to wait until the 7th day of his death. You're in such a hurry to elect a sect master. Are you not putting my grandfather in your eyes at all?" Chun Yuanshui's gaze flickered, and he nodded. "Miss Ruoyu is right. Let's first bury the old sect master properly. The matter of choosing a sect master is indeed not urgent. Now, all of you can leave first. I need to properly settle my grandfather." Ruoyu ordered everyone to leave. Although Chun Yuanshui's brows were slightly furrowed, and he was a little unhappy with Ruoyu's attitude, he could only clasp his hands and leave. After everyone left, Ruoyu's beautiful eyes were filled with determination as she stared at the old man who had already closed his eyes. "Grandpa, I will definitely help you find a successor and help him ascend to the position of headmaster. I believe that you have made the right choice." Zhuowen looked at the slightly dilapidated city wall in front of him and was a little speechless. Just how decrepit was the giant spirit sect? They didn't even repair the city wall. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that there were no formations set up around the giant spirit sect. Could it be that they couldn't even afford to hire a divine array master? Thinking of this possibility, Zhuowen was speechless. He didn't care too much. The giant spirit sect's territory was just a passing road for him. He would directly go to the boundary after passing through the giant spirit sect. When Zhuowen arrived at the city gate, he was immediately stopped by the guards. "I say, what is the meaning of this?" Zhuowen looked at the two guards who stopped him in puzzlement. The two guards looked up and down at Zhuowen and revealed a surprised expression. Immediately, they said solemnly, "Brother, our elder Chin invites you. He hopes that you can go over." Chapter 2899. Chinibu girl, Elder Chun? I'm sorry, but I've never heard of this person. I'm not interested in meeting this so-called Elder Chun. Zhuowen frowned slightly, feeling somewhat baffled. This was his first time in the giant spirit sect, and he didn't know the Elder Chun that the two guards were talking about. Now that the two guards suddenly asked him to meet this so-called Elder Chun, Zhuowen was naturally speechless. When Zhuowen said this, the two guards' faces turned gloomy. One of the guards said fiercely, "Impudent. It's your honor that Elder Chun wants to meet you. He's the strongest person in our giant spirit sect now. He has a high position and is giving you face by meeting you." "What? I don't want to meet him, but you're forcing me to meet him?" Zhuowen's face turned cold. Although he didn't want to cause trouble, if trouble provoked him, he wouldn't avoid it. The guard who originally spoke ruthlessly couldn't help but tremble when he saw the coldness in Zhuowen's eyes. It was as if he was being stared at by a terrifying beast. Due to an inexplicable fear, the guard forcefully swallowed back the ruthless words that were about to escape his mouth. The other guard also felt the coldness in Zhuowen's eyes, but he was obviously more courageous. He shouted, "You're impudent. Could it be that you want to fight?" Slap. Unfortunately, the guard had just finished speaking when he was casually slapped away by Zhuowen. He smashed into the ground not far away, and his cheeks were completely swollen. "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. I still have important things to do. If you continue to talk nonsense with me, I don't mind staining my hands with blood." Zhuowen narrowed his eyes, not concealing the killing intent in his eyes at all. Now that he was fleeing, It was naturally impossible for him to waste time in a small sect like the Giant Spirit sect. He only wanted to reach the boundary of the domain as soon as possible and then escape the domain of the 10 Extremes Corp sect. You! How dare you! The other guard was immediately frightened. His cultivation was similar to his companion, and they were both only half-step heavenly Tao lords. However, the young man in front of him had casually slapped his companion away. His strength was far above the two of them, and he should be a Tao affirmation expert. What? Do you feel unhappy and want to stand up for your companion? Zhuowen looked at the guard coldly. The latter was so scared that he fell to the ground, without any will to fight. The commotion at the city gate naturally attracted the attention of the other cultivators entering and leaving. Many cultivators were engaged in a heated discussion in the distance. The subject of their discussion was naturally Zhuowen, the main character of this incident. Zhuowen did not attack again. Instead, he brushed past the guard and entered the city gate. After Zhuowen walked far away, the guard knelt on the ground. Just now, Zhuowen had given him too much pressure, causing his muscles to tense up. Now that Zhuowen had left, he relaxed a little and knelt on the ground. No, I have to inform Elder Chun as soon as possible. The scarred youth he is looking for is in our giant spiritual city. The guard thought of something and immediately took out his communication jade talisman and sent a message to Chen Yuan Shui. Giant Spiritual City was the most prosperous city of the Giant Spiritual Sect. Zhuowen walked slowly through the streets of the city. When he came to the Giant Spiritual Sect, he was not worried that his disguise would be seen through. Moreover, he also found that there were no masters of the 10 Absolutes Corp sect station here. Perhaps it was because the Giant Spiritual Sect was too weak and inconspicuous that the 10 Absolutes Corp sect had probably forgotten about this sect. It seems that I have to cherish this rare, peaceful time. When I reach the border of the domain, a life and death battle is inevitable. Zhuowen muttered to himself. He deliberately slowed down his pace and enjoyed the calm feeling. Suddenly, Zhuowen smelled a fragrance, and then a beautiful woman with an icy cold expression walked towards him. She didn't say a word as she pulled his hand and forcefully brought him to a small alley at the side. Zhuowen was surprised, but he did not break free from the woman's hand because he did not feel any malice from her. "Excuse me, did you come from the valley hundreds of miles away from the Giant Spiritual Sect?" The beautiful woman stopped and turned around. The coldness on her pretty face had been replaced by excitement as she asked excitedly, Miss, how did you know?" Zhuowen's gaze immediately became serious. His muscles tensed up like a vigilant beast. The beautiful woman also noticed Zhuowen's abnormality and hurriedly said, "Friend, I have no malice. I just want to confirm with you. This question is very important to me." "Yes." Zhuowen nodded. He could not help but think of the Eye of Nothingness that appeared outside the valley last night. Could it be that the owner of the Eye of Nothingness was this woman? "Ah!" the beautiful woman exclaimed. She was so excited that tears filled her eyes and she sobbed. Zhuowen was a little speechless. If outsiders saw this woman like this, they would definitely misunderstand that he had done something shameless to make her cry. "Miss you." Zhuowen did not understand and could only helplessly open his mouth. The beautiful woman realized that she had lost her composure and quickly apologized. Then she said seriously, "Friend, I'm really sorry. I was too excited. I'm the granddaughter of the Giant Spiritual Sect sect master, Sun Ryu. You could just call me Ruoyu. How should I address you?" "Just call me Ma Yujia." Zhuowen did not hesitate to steal Ma Yujia's name. After all, he was now wanted by the 10 Extremes Corp sect. The name Zhuowen could not be used carelessly here. Otherwise, someone would die. So it's Brother Ma. I wonder if Brother Ma is willing to succeed the position of sect master of our giant spiritual sect? Sun Ryu regained her composure and said something that made Zhuowen extremely astonished. "Miss Ryu, you were joking just now, right?" Zhuowen was speechless. This was the first time he had seen Sun Ryu, and it was also the first time he had entered the giant spiritual sect. Now, Sun Ryu actually asked him to succeed the position of sect master of the giant spiritual sect. This style was really wrong. Could it be that succeeding the position of sect master of the giant spiritual sect was so simple? Was it so childish? Was she teasing him? However, Sun Ryu's beautiful eyes were full of seriousness as she said, "Yes, the position of sect master of the giant spiritual sect belongs to you. As long as Brother Ma agrees to me, then you will immediately become the sect master of the giant spiritual sect." Zhuowen was completely defeated by Sun Ryu's serious expression. "I say, you're lying through your teeth. Miss Ryu and I have only known each other for a few minutes, and you actually want me to succeed the position of sect master of the giant spiritual sect. Are you sure you're not joking with me?" Zhuowen tried to open his mouth to wake Sun Ryu up. He thought that this ice-cold beauty in front of him might be a Chinibi girl. What she did was too stupid. He couldn't accept it at all. It was too childish. Unexpectedly, Sun Ryu still shook her head. She said very seriously, "Brother Ma, I'm not joking. You may not know the way our giant spiritual sect chooses the next sect master. Before my grandfather passed away, he used the art of divination to calculate that the next sect master will be a young man with 2 scars on his face in a valley hundreds of miles away from the giant spiritual sect. Chapter 2900. The Sect Master's Position Delivered to the Door, Divine Divination Technique? Zhuowen was surprised. It was the first time he heard that a sect used divination to select a successor. This was too strange. However, Zhuowen recalled the pair of eyes of nothingness that appeared in the air above the valley when he first arrived. Could it be that the eyes of nothingness were what Sun Ryu said? Could it be that the former sect master of the giant spirit sect used the art of divination to manifest it? Brother Ma, you are not a cultivator of our giant spirit sect, so you may not know what the divine divination technique is. The divine divination technique comes from the divine divination secret. It is a powerful Tao that can peer into fate and avoid disaster. It is a very mysterious power. Generally, the successor that can be deduced with the divine divination technique can basically lead the giant spirit sect to the peak. Sun Ryu explained. Zhuowen shook his head and expressed doubt. Since the divine divination technique is so magical, why is your giant spirit sect still declining? Isn't it said that it can seek good fortune and avoid disaster? Logically speaking, with the help of this divine divination technique, your giant spirit sect should be thriving day by day. Sun Ryu sighed softly. Brother Ma, you don't know. The divine divination secret is really too mysterious. It is difficult for ordinary people to cultivate it. The recent sect masters only know a little bit of the divine divination secret. They can't even seek good fortune and avoid disaster. And it was even worse in my grandfather's generation. My grandfather couldn't even reach the entry level of the divine divination secret. In the end, he used a forbidden technique to burn his life force to finally use the divine divination technique to find the true successor of the giant spirit sect. Speaking of this, Sun Ryu looked up at Zhuowen with a hopeful look and said, Brother Ma, what my grandfather described before his death is almost exactly the same as you. You're the real successor that my grandfather found with the divine divination technique. In the entire giant spirit sect, only you are qualified to succeed the position of the sect master of the giant spirit sect, and only you can lead the giant spirit sect to the peak. Zhuowen rubbed his nose. He was absolutely certain that the owner of the Eye of Nothingness was Sun Ryu's grandfather. Speaking of which, when he saw the Eye of Nothingness running away in a panic, he thought that the Eye of Nothingness had seen through his true identity. Therefore, he borrowed the power of the lightning of heaven and earth to attack the Eye of Nothingness. Although the Eye of Nothingness had escaped in the end, Zhuowen knew that the power of lightning had caused considerable damage to the owner of the Eye of Nothingness. Perhaps the old sect master's death had something to do with Zhuowen. Thinking of this, Zhuowen felt a little ashamed. However, that was a special time after all, and he was fully alert. An Eye of Nothingness had suddenly appeared and spied on them. then quickly fled. Naturally, he couldn't let it go so easily. What did your sect leader say before he passed away? Why are you so sure that I'm the sect leader's successor? Zhuan was curious. Sun Ryu didn't doubt him and repeated the old sect master's words before he died. After Zhuan heard this, he smiled bitterly in his heart. Perhaps the old sect master didn't want to appoint him as the successor. Perhaps he wanted to say that he, Zhuan, was the culprit that caused his divine divination to fail. Of course, Zhuan only thought this in his heart and wouldn't say it out loud. Although Zhuan didn't care about Sun Ryu and the entire giant spirit sect, this place was still within the domain of the 10 ultimate Incorp sect. He didn't want to cause any trouble and attract the attention of the 10 ultimate Incorp sect. Miss Ryu, your grandfather might have other intentions. I don't think it's me. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Zhuan didn't want to be entangled with Sun Ryu and the giant spirit sect, so he casually found an excuse to leave the giant spirit sect and head to the domain boundary. However, Sun Ryu stood in front of Zhuan, her beautiful eyes full of determination. In order to perform the divine divination, my grandfather didn't hesitate to burn his life as the price. Since he said it's you, then it's you. Zhuan had a headache. Sun Ryu was too stubborn. Did she think that he was the sect leader? I say, Miss Ryu, you're the direct granddaughter of the sect master, and your talent isn't bad either. You're the most suitable person to be the sect master of the giant spirit sect. Zhuan spread his hands. He still had a lot of things to do and didn't want to waste time in the giant spirit sect, so he simply refused Sun Ryu's request. Sun Ryu was a little anxious. She said eagerly, Brother Ma, you seem to be in a hurry. Do you have something urgent to do? If you have something urgent, I can help you after you succeed as the sect leader of the giant spirit sect. Zhuan was speechless. He could only say, Miss Ryu, in fact, I'm not a cultivator of the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect. I'm just passing by. Now I have something important to do, so it's inconvenient for me to stay here for a long time. Therefore, it's impossible for me to succeed as the sect leader of the giant spirit sect. Brother Ma, are you leaving the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect now? Sun Ryu looked at Zhuan strangely. Why? Is there a problem? Zhuan pretended to be surprised and asked, That's not a problem, but I'm afraid you can't go out during this period of time. The 10 Ultimates Incorp sect has completely sealed off the domain boundary. At the boundary, you can only enter but not leave. No matter who it is, even the disciples of the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect can't go out. Sun Ryu said, What? No one is allowed to pass. Zhuan's face was gloomy. Although he knew that the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect would definitely take action, at most, they would just tighten the security of the domain boundary. But he never thought that the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect would be so ruthless and directly seal off the border. No one could go out. Yes, Brother Ma, you can't leave the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect's domain now. How about this? You can become the sect leader of the giant spirit sect. Half a year later, there may be an opportunity to arrange for you to go to the Starry Sky battlefield. At that time, you can also leave the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect's domain, Sun Ryu said. Half a year later, Zhuan asked doubtfully, Brother Ma, don't you know? It said that somewhere in the Starry Sky battlefield is the place where ancestor sorcerer Gong died. Now, the whole Xianmi heavenly territory is spreading this news. Moreover, the sect leader of the 10 Ultimates Incorp sect, Senki Yin, has released news that in half a year, he will point out the specific location of the place where ancestor sorcerer Gong died. With this news, at that time, heroes will gather and come out in large numbers. It will be very lively. Now, many experts from various forces have gone to the Starry Sky battlefield. Even the foreign tribes of the primitive heavenly territory are ready to make a move. Sun Ryu was a little speechless. She felt that Zhuan's news was too outdated. Was this guy really a cultivator of the Xianmi heavenly territory? The place where ancestor sorcerer Gong died. Chapter 2901. Face slapping. Speaking of which, When Zhuowen participated in the Monster Genius Conference last time, Yi Qidong and the other geniuses came because of this news. However, Zhuowen left early and did not participate in the discussion of Ghost Plume. In addition, he immediately entered the underworld hell to collect the elusive underworld soul flower after leaving the Monster Genius Conference. After that, he went to rescue Yin Wuxia and then began to flee. Naturally, he did not have time to inquire about the news released by the 10 Ultimates Yin Corp sect. If Sun Ryu had not mentioned it, Zhuowen would not have known about it. However, now that he knew, he had to go to the Starry Sky battlefield. He might not care about the corpse of Ancestral Witch Gonggong, but he cared about the venomous insect in Gonggong's body. His Panga's sacred body had reached the peak of 5-star. As long as he got Gonggong's venomous insect, he had a great chance of breaking through to 6-star. In addition, the boundary of the 10 Ultimates Yin Corp sect had been sealed. Zhuowen gradually dispelled the idea of breaking through the boundary and leaving. He knew that breaking through was a bad idea, and the success rate was not high. It would be easy to alert the enemy. When Sun Ryu saw that Zhuowen was tempted, she immediately added fuel to the fire. She advised Zhuowen to stay in the Giant Spirit sect for the time being. After the limelight of this half a year had passed, it would be much easier for him to leave the Yin Corp sect. It had to be said that Sun Ryu was eloquent. In addition, Zhuowen was already tempted. Zhuowen finally nodded and agreed to succeed the sect master of the Giant Spirit sect. Sun Ryu breathed a sigh of relief and was overjoyed. She had finally persuaded the guy in front of her. "Brother Ma, come back to the sect with me now. After 7 days of my grandfather's death, I will arrange the sect master succession ceremony for you. At that time, you will be the new sect master of our Giant Spirit sect," Sun Ryu said with a smile. Zhuowen took another look at Sun Ryu, and his eyes showed surprise. He had to admit that Sun Ryu was indeed very beautiful. Among the many women Zhuowen had met, only Yao Xiangjuan, Mu Qinxue, and Moyan Wushang were comparable to this woman. They were rare beauties. Naturally Sun Ryu could see the surprise in Zhuowen's spirit sect, but she was natural. She did not show a shy look like a little girl. She led Zhuowen, and Zhuowen walked sect. Of course. Sun Ryu. Zhuowen nodded. Sun Ryu gave him a good feeling, and she was very sincere in receiving him. Is this a sect? Is of not studio? Oh, of course time of studio. Is of time? Studio is a time of time? Studio of course of studio. Brother Ma. This is the inner sect of our Giant Spirit sect. Sun Ryu brought Zhuowen to a very spacious area. In this area, there are many tall buildings. However, these buildings seemed to have been built for a long time and looked a little shabby. However, judging from the style of these buildings and the vicissitudes of life, this inner sect should have been a prosperous scene in a long time. Although at a glance, there were still many cultivators coming and going within the inner sect, but they were basically ordinary cultivators with mixed talents. The number was not many, far from reaching the scale of the general Dao sections. Sun Ryu saw Zhuowen shaking his head subconsciously, and her face was a little red. She said, "Brother Ma, although our Giant Spirit sect may not be as good as the general Dao sects now, I think Brother Ma will definitely be able to develop the Giant Spirit sect very well in the future." "Miss Ryu, do you believe in me so much?" Zhuowen looked at Sun Ryu next to him strangely. Sun Ryu smiled and said, "I believe in my grandfather's divine divination technique. This technique is the most mysterious technique of our Giant Spirit sect. All the successors who can use the divine divination technique in the past have basically not missed it." Zhuowen was a little speechless, thinking that this girl has blind confidence in the divine divination technique. Speaking of which, Zhuowen had heard about the divine divination technique from Sun Ryu several times. He couldn't help but be curious in his heart. Is this divine divination technique really so magical? "Junior sister Ryu, haven't you always been clean before? Why did you suddenly bring back a dog man today?" Just as Sun Ryu brought Zhuowen into the Giant Spirit sect's inner sect, a sharp voice with sarcasm sounded. It was very harsh. Zhuowen followed the voice and saw 3 people walking over. The person in the lead was a young man with a pale face. He was dressed in white and had a white band on his head. He was holding a folding fan in front of his chest in a very pretentious manner. Behind this young man in white were 2 middle-aged men. They should be this young man's subordinates. Zhuowen saw the hostility in this young man's eyes at a glance. Moreover, this hostility was directed at him. He didn't need a guess to know that this young man in white was hostile towards him because of Sun Ruyu. Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. As expected, he wasn't suitable to walk with beauties. He always suffered hostility for no reason. However, Zhuowen didn't care. This young man in white's cultivation was really just passable. He was only a half-step Heaven Dao Lord. He was older than Sun Ruyu, and his cultivation was far inferior to Sun Ruyu's. Clearly, his talent was really quite poor. Qin Shixin, what do you mean? Why do you have to insult my friend? Besides that, what does my friend have to do with you? Sun Ruyu spoke coldly. The young man's eyes narrowed as he placed his attention on Zhuowen. When he saw the scar on Zhuowen's face, he was first stunned, and then a strand of killing intent erupted from the depths of his eyes. Junior Sister Ryu, you're really swift. You actually found him. But what's the meaning of bringing him into the inner sect? Could it be that you've forgotten what you promised my father? Qin Shixin laughed coldly. Sun Ruyu's voice was extremely cold as she said, Qin Shixin, let me tell you clearly that I only believed the results of my grandfather's divination before he passed away. Brother Ma, let's go. As soon as she finished speaking, Sun Ryu intended to pull Zhuowen along and walk past Qin Shixin. However, she quickly noticed that the young man behind her was like a rock that didn't move at all. Brother Ma? Sun Ryu gazed at Zhuowen with a bewildered expression. Zhuowen smiled faintly at Sun Ryu, then walked past Sun Ryu and arrived in front of Qin Shixin. He said indifferently, Did you just call me a dog man? Qin Shixin didn't expect that the young man Sun Ryu brought would actually stand up. He was stunned at first, then laughed cruelly. What? You're still not convinced? Don't tell me you want me to apologize to you? As he spoke, Qin Shixin fearlessly put his face in front of Zhuowen. His eyes were full of provocation. Slap! Zhuowen slapped Qin Shixin to the ground and said coldly, You're wrong. I want you to kneel on the ground and kowtow to me in apology. Qin Shixin was completely dazed. He fell head first at Zhuowen's feet. He roared angrily, trying to get up. Unfortunately, what greeted him was Zhuowen's right foot mercilessly stepping on him. Chapter 29:02. Elder Duzhuan exerted a little force with his foot, and Qin Shixin screamed as he lay on the ground twitching. His eyes rolled back, and he was on the verge of death. How dare you attack our young master? You're courting death. The 2 middle-aged men following behind Qin Shixin also came back to their senses. They roared angrily and turned into 2 black bolts of lightning that attacked Zhuowen from both sides. Brother Ma, be careful. Sun Ryu's beautiful eyes were filled with worry when she saw the 2 middle-aged men joining forces to attack Zhuowen. Just as she was about to intervene, she heard 2 loud slaps. Slap! Soon after, Sun Ryu was dumbstruck as she watched Zhuowen casually slap the 2 middle-aged men to the ground, causing them to fall flat on their faces. Sun Ryu was shocked. She had previously checked Zhuowen's aura and found that this scarred young man was only a Heavenly Dao Master. The 2 middle-aged men were peak Heavenly Dao Masters and were considered experts with a good reputation in the Giant Spirit sect. However, they were knocked down by 2 casual slaps from the young man in front of her. But soon, Sun Ryu's beautiful eyes shone brightly. She knew that the old sect master's divination was not wrong. He had chosen the right person. Although the cultivation of the young man in front of her was not very high, his strength was beyond her expectations. Even she would not have been able to easily deal with 2 powerhouses of the same level. But in the hands of this young man, it was done so effortlessly. Watch where you're going in the future. Don't bite anyone you see. If you bite the wrong person, you'll end up like this. Zhuowen hooked Qin Shixin's abdomen with his right foot. With a light force, Chun Shirshin flew out like a dead dog and crashed into a nearby place. Young master. The two middle-aged men who were slapped in the face by Zhuowen saw Chun Shirshin being kicked away. They endured the injuries in their bodies and rushed over to catch Chun Shirshin. At this moment, Chun Shirshin's eyes rolled back and he was foaming at the mouth. He had already fallen unconscious. How dare you? Young master, is Elder Chen's son, and you dare to hit him? Are you tired of living? One of the servants shouted at Zhuowen, his eyes spitting fire. I think you're tired of living. Zhuowen waved his right hand in the air, and the clamoring servant was slapped to the ground again. He spat out a mouthful of broken teeth and blood, and his body twitched incessantly. Do you also want to seek justice for your young master? Zhuowen's gaze fell on another servant, and a chilling intent spread from his eyes. The servant hurriedly knelt down and begged for mercy, repeatedly saying that he didn't dare. What a joke! This guy in front of them was definitely someone who feared nothing. Now that they were no match for him, he naturally didn't dare to act rashly. However, he also knew that since this person hit Chun Shirshin, there would naturally be someone to deal with him. After all, Chun Shirshin was Chun Yuanshui's son, and Chun Yuanshui was the #1 expert in the sect. Now, there were too many cultivators in the sect who wanted to curry favor with Chun Yuanshui. As long as Chun Shirshin's matter spread, there would naturally be someone to deal with this guy who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Get lost. Zhuowen had just entered the giant spirit sect and didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so he didn't go too far. After getting Zhuowen's permission, the two servants supported Chun Shirshin, who was still rolling his eyes, and left the place in a hurry. Brother Ma, I'm afraid you're in trouble. That Chun Shirshin is Chun Yuanshui's son, and Chun Yuanshui's power in the sect is huge. Now that he has lost my grandfather's restraint, he has the tendency to cover the sky with one hand. Sun Ruoyu's beautiful eyes revealed a worried expression. Zhuowen smiled faintly and said, Didn't Miss Ryu want me to sit on the position of sect master? I think Chun Yuanshui's faction doesn't like me very much. Are you sure you can help me ascend to the position of sect master? Sun Ryu's beautiful eyes revealed a firm look, and she nodded heavily. Brother Ma, you can rest assured that I will do what I say. Before my grandfather passed away, he gave me the sect master's token for safekeeping. As long as you have the sect master's token, you are the sect master of the giant spirit sect. Zhuowen nodded and didn't care. He knew that if Chun Yuanshui really coveted the position of sect master of the giant spirit sect, he would definitely not care too much about the sect master's token. Of course, Zhuowen naturally didn't care about Chun Yuanshui. In the insignificant giant spirit sect, even the old sect master Zhuowen didn't particularly care, let alone Chun Yuanshui, who was weaker than the old sect master. Seeing Zhuowen calm and composed, Sun Ryu's beautiful eyes revealed a curious look, and she couldn't help but ask, Brother Ma, Chun Yuanshui is the second strongest expert in our giant spirit sect. He is infinitely close to the second step of Dao confirmation. Are you not afraid? Afraid? The word afraid really doesn't exist in my dictionary. Miss Ryu, take me to see the old sect master first, Zhuowen said lightly. Sun Ryu looked deeply at the young man in front of her and couldn't help but be infected by the strong confidence exuding from the latter. She nodded heavily and led Zhuowen to the sect master's hall. It had to be said that the sect master's hall was very magnificent. Although it was a little shabby, it was still difficult to conceal the vicissitudes of life that the hall revealed. However, at this time, there were more than 10 cultivators with powerful auras guarding outside the sect master's hall. Among them, the leader was an old man with a hooked nose. When the old man with a hooked nose saw Zhuowen and Sun Ryu coming from afar, his pair of shady eyes narrowed and revealed a playful smile. Sun Ryu walked to the front of the sect master's hall. When she saw the dozen cultivators guarding outside the hall, her pretty face instantly darkened. She looked at the old man with a hooked nose and said coldly, Elder Du, what is the meaning of this? The old man with a hooked nose named Elder Du chuckled and said, Miss Ryu, you are really filial. You've come to see the old sect master again. We were sent here by Elder Chun. After all, the old sect master's body is very important. Naturally, we have to guard it well to prevent any malicious people from doing anything extreme to the old sect master's body. Elder Du didn't care about Sun Ruiyu's questioning. Instead, he waved his hand to the cultivators guarding the door behind him and said, Step aside and let Miss Ruiyu in. After giving his instructions, Elder Du very elegantly gestured for Sun Ruiyu to enter. Although Sun Ruiyu was unhappy with Chun Yuanshui's unauthorized arrangement, she didn't say anything and walked straight into the hall. Zhuowen followed behind Sun Ryu, but when he passed by Elder Du, the latter stretched out his right hand and stopped Zhuowen. Little brother, I see that you are a stranger. If you're not a member of our sect, then get lost. Chapter 2903. Making things difficult. Sun Ryu turned around, her beautiful eyes filled with anger. She scolded, Elder Du, what do you mean by this? Brother Ma is my friend and also the candidate appointed by my grandfather. He's the future sect master. How dare you? Elder Du looked surprised. He looked at Zhuowen from head to toe and sneered, A piece of trash that's the heavenly Tao master? Miss Ryu, it's not that I don't believe in the heavenly divination technique, but I think the old sect master made a mistake. If such a piece of trash becomes our sect master, it will only bring us into the fire pit. Elder Qin Yuanshui is the most suitable candidate. He is not far from the second step of Tao confirmation and can break through at any time. As long as our giant spirit sect has a heaven's mandate powerhouse, we will not decline and will continue to prosper. Speaking of this, Elder Du's tone became very rude. He continued, Miss Ryu, you're too obsessed with the heavenly divination technique. Just like the old sect master, that thing is illusory in my opinion. It's because you've been obsessed with the heavenly divination technique that the Great Spirit sect has become what it is now. Sun Ryu was very angry and looked at Elder Du in disbelief. She didn't expect Elder Du to have such thoughts. Elder Du, please pay attention to your words. The heavenly divination technique is the foundation of our Great Spirit sect. It's a powerful technique passed down from generation to generation. Before Sun Ryu could finish, she was immediately interrupted by Elder Du. Miss Ryu, if you weren't the granddaughter of the old sect master, I would have taught you a lesson right now. Let me ask you, if the heavenly divination technique is so magical, why has our Great Spirit sect declined to its current state? We've always placed our hopes on the old sect master, hoping that he could make our Great Spirit sect rise again. But we've been disappointed again and again. We've had enough. What bullshit heavenly divination technique? What bullshit heavenly destined successor? Everything is bullshit. Do you only believe in what's in front of me? I don't believe in that illusory destiny. The more Elder Du spoke, the more agitated he became and shouted at Sun Ryu. Sun Ryu's pretty face turned pale. She couldn't help but take a few steps back and murmured, Is that what you think? It's not just me. All the brothers in the sect think the same. We've had enough of the old sect master. It's best that he's dead now. We don't need to bother the old sect master with his so-called heavenly divination to choose the sect master. We'll choose the true successor ourselves. Elder Qin Yuanshui is the best candidate for the next sect master. Miss Ryu, you don't have to interfere in this matter. You're still too young and don't know anything. If we let you choose the successor based on your personality, it will only lead the giant spirit sect into the abyss. After Elder Du finished speaking, the dozen or so cultivators also echoed in unison as they looked at Sun Ryu coldly. Sun Ryu was in a daze. She did not expect that the disciples and elders of the sect would hold such a deep grudge against her grandfather. With a soft sigh, Sun Ryu seemed to have lost her vitality. She looked at Zhuowen, who was stopped by Elder Du, and said with a bitter smile, Brother Ma, I'm really sorry. I didn't expect that my grandfather and I would be criticized and opposed by so many people in the sect. I've implicated you this time." With that, Sun Ryu looked at Elder Du and said faintly, "I'll leave the matter of the sect master succession to you, but this is my friend. Let him go." Seeing that Sun Ryu had given in, Elder Du's face showed a smug look. He glanced at Zhuowen disdainfully and said arrogantly, "Leave? Miss Ryu, didn't the old sect master say that the young man with 2 scars on his face is the true successor? Since the old sect master has divined the successor, there must be something extraordinary about him. In order to prove that the old sect master was wrong, I'll destroy the successor that the old sect master has divined today." The moment Elder Du saw Zhuowen, he had already guessed that the latter should be the cultivator that the old sect master had mentioned before he passed away. "Xinyu, go and meet this destined successor." Elder Du crossed his arms in front of his chest, took a few steps back, and sneered. Yes, a young man in blue walked out from the dozen or so cultivators at the entrance of the main hall. With a clang, he drew a sharp divine sword from his back. With a murderous look in his eyes, he took a step forward and charged at Zhuowen like a flying immortal. The young man in blue used a killing move as soon as he made his move. Obviously, he wanted to kill Zhuowen with one move. Sun Ryu stomped her feet in anger and wanted to step forward to stop him, but she was stopped by 2 cultivators with sharp eyes and agile hands. Zhuowen had been watching quietly. Now that he saw that Elder Du wanted to use him as a target, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Seeing that Zhuowen could still laugh at this time, the young man in blue could not help but mock. "You're about to die, and you can still laugh." "About to die?" Zhuowen retorted. He slowly stretched out his right hand and pressed it in the air. Then, a miraculous scene appeared. The blue-clothed young man, who was holding a divine sword and whose entire body was radiating light, looked like a flying immortal. Before he could even reach Zhuowen, he inexplicably fell to the ground from midair. On the ground where the young man in blue was, there was a palm print that was bigger than the young man in blue. The young man in blue struggled to get up, but it was to no avail. It was as if he was being suppressed by some kind of powerful force, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. This unexpected scene left everyone dumbfounded. The young man in blue, who had been graceful just a moment ago, inexplicably fell from the air and lay on the ground like a dead dog, vomiting blood. Zhuowen slowly walked to the young man in blue, lifted his chin with the tip of his foot, and said indifferently, "You just said that I'm about to die. You seem to have said the opposite." The young man in blue was extremely frightened. He did not know why a strange and terrifying force suddenly appeared in his body and suppressed him, but he soon understood that this strange force must be the work of this young man in front of him. The young man in blue trembled all over and could not speak clearly. "How dare you?" Elder Du was the first to react. With a stomp of his right foot, a terrifying ripple burst out from the bottom of his foot and spread out in all directions.